All right, hello. Take two. Hopefully this works and folks can hear me and see me. Looks like it works on my end. So this is take two. What I'm going to do here is this video is a Bitcoiner's reaction to this Unmasking Satoshi Nakamoto video that just recently came out by Barely Sociable. And I went through his Twitter account and I looked and tried to find out if this guy had some kind of bias or something. Like, why did he make such a biased piece? And I think it's more genuine. Like, it doesn't seem like this guy has some kind of agenda that he has run an ICO before. He's trying to promote Bcash or something like that, like some other altcoin. It seems like the guy is just new to Bitcoin and just has his own opinions and is kind of mistaken and has flawed logic about the whole story. So while it's well researched and everything, I mean, I got about a third of the way through this video and there's about 150,000 views on it, 200,000 maybe. Yeah, we're back. We're back, MZ. I figured it out. So let me just play a little quick thing here, MZ. Tell me if you can hear this. Can you hear the audio of this YouTube video? Because we're gonna play the whole thing and react to it. So hopefully it's working now. It has very good quality. It's a good edit, a good sound. I mean, the guy makes a really nice video.
There are only two of the accused who are British. One of those has two spaces in every one of his papers. Figure it out, people. It'll take you 15 minutes.
All right, good stuff. It works. So this is part 3. There was 2 other parts. I haven't watched them myself. I'm not going to watch them. Basically, if you're new to Bitcoin or if you know somebody new to Bitcoin who texts you and is like, hey, did you see who they unmasked Satoshi as? Or sends you this link or whatever, I'm going to do the work for you. I'm going to react to the information in this video as a Bitcoiner so you can just point them in my direction and hopefully you won't have to explain how biased this thing was. So here we go. Let's get into it. I'm going to put it on 1.25x to start with. We might go faster.
As you all know, it's been a while since I've talked about Mr. Satoshi Nakamoto. And in all honesty, this topic has been something I've put on the back burner until I can actually figure it out. Now, I know you all are incredibly anxious to watch this video, but if you haven't watched part 1 or 2, you should know that this video is building off 55 minutes of context.
Make my face smaller.
I will link those together in a playlist for you now. Before we dive into the final chapter of this internet mystery, I really need to provide a disclaimer, as a lot of people bring up the ethics of naming Satoshi Nakamoto. For those people that are concerned that Satoshi is just trying to live his life away from the Bitcoin project, that doesn't appear to be the case. Furthermore, I wouldn't say it's unethical to call out someone who is already a public figure, especially when there's enough evidence to suffice it. Well, unlike Newsweek, I'm not throwing someone
I don't think that's I don't think that's a good logic to start with the video, because you Satoshi Nakamoto is not a public figure. The person, the scapegoat is, you know, the anonymous character is a public figure, but it's anonymous for a reason. The person left the project for a reason, and there's no mention of any of the previous actions that were taken against political oppositions to the government controlled currencies before. There's no mention of the trouble that, you know, the difference between BitTorrent and Napster, and how they were able to shut down Napster and they weren't able to shut down BitTorrent because BitTorrent was decentralized. There's no mention of eGold and how eGold had tried to do a competing currency, a digital gold currency for the internet, and how the feds raided them and shut the whole thing down. So this person who did this video just doesn't even understand the basic concept of why Bitcoin was created. But then later on the video, he goes on and mentions that
used to it.
He understands
if Satoshi
that.
is
so
still around, then you definitely deserve the right to know. The dust has long...
You don't deserve the right to know. Satoshi voluntarily put Bitcoin up and voluntarily left. So we don't have the right to invade Satoshi's privacy. If the person wants to remain, or group or whatever wants to remain anonymous, you don't have the right to know.
Settled for cryptocurrencies, and while I can understand Satoshi wanting to hide early on, that argument really isn't true today. I really doubt...
So you really think that the argument that the #1 competitor to the fiat currency, the United States dollar, that's the global reserve currency that has had wars fought over it, that they've arrested people for, who've tried to, and they had to give like a 72% refund back to all the investors because the United States has control over currency and banking, and this was considered a threat. So the Telegram project, even though I think it was like a security and it probably should have been shut down, and I'm a Bitcoiner, so I'm like, you know, whatever, sure, like they were obviously trying to just get rich off of a new coin. They weren't, I wish they would support Bitcoin, but still, that proves that if Satoshi was public, then there would be problems for sure, and not just from governments. Like, could you imagine the security risk for that person? I mean, it's obviously that's a bad argument that just because Bitcoin succeeded so far that the threat is over. The threat is not over. We haven't really had a government attack since they tried to shut down Bitcoin in 2013. And instead, they decided to go after all the Bitcoin businesses like the BitInstant and like Charlie Shrem. And they just tried to make examples out of Bitcoiners that were public. So anyways, let's keep watching.
Anything will actually happen as a result of me making this video. And despite the fact that I can line up 100 different pieces of circumstantial evidence, he still has plausible deniability. Just so you're aware, I'm not the first person to settle on this individual candidate, but while many people have speculated this person to be behind the creation of Bitcoin, I plan on going
MZ, you're right. Yeah, you would be crazy to put a super big target on you.
As I've had time to take the baton and run with it, I'm certain many people in the cryptocurrency space know who Satoshi Nakamoto is, and surprisingly, even John McAfee is one of those people on that list.
Yes.
I'm well aware that 99% of what this guy has to say is exaggerated bullshit, but even a broken clock is right twice a day. If the secret is already out, then the secret is already out. So it's about time that someone actually...
The secret is not out. That's the thing. This guy keeps presenting this this message that the secret's out and everybody knows. That's a manipulation tactic. It's called common knowledge. He's trying to create this thing. It's actually like a tactic in game theory and manipulation that you try to... Donald Trump does this all the time. Everybody knows I'm the greatest at knowing what the coronavirus treatment should be. Everybody knows that I'm so great at whatever. Donald Trump does that, and that's what manipulators do. And sure, for a video, you're going to write that in saying, everybody knows who Satoshi is, so I'm going to present it to you. It's like a clickbaity, manipulative thing. No, everybody doesn't know. I mean, sure, you wonder, but nobody knows. Otherwise, it would have been out by now. Who does this guy think he is to just be able to be so smart that he's going to know? He's going to know over more than all the other Bitcoiners that have existed since 2010 and 9 that this guy knows. I mean, obviously, the core developers and the early Bitcoiners and everything speculate, but nobody knows. I'm sure maybe the guy that, or the girl or whatever, that's Satoshi, they know, but no, everybody knows. That's not true. So if you're new to Bitcoin and you're like, oh, cool, everybody already knows, so it's not really a secret, that's just a lie. It's not true. Everybody's still just as in the dark as we were 7 years ago and 3 years ago. And like, people don't know. So that's just not true.
Actually builds a case for the most likely candidate. It seems like every month another person is popping up to claim that they're Satoshi Nakamoto. And frankly, I'd rather tell everyone who Satoshi is than have to deal with a never-ending battle of Satoshi imposters. So with all that being said, let's finally dive in.
That's true. That's annoying.
The final chapter and final clue.
The Satoshi imposters are annoying for sure.
In the last part, we discussed Satoshi's message to the P2P Foundation forums. This was a day after Newsweek thrust California resident Dorian Satoshi Nakamoto into the public eye. Last time we covered this topic, I pointed out how this message was never debunked and was likely from Satoshi. We ultimately came to that conclusion because despite the fact that Satoshi's P2P Foundation forum account was hacked, we managed to find the date that the hacker recovered this forum account. The recovery date showed a 6-month discrepancy. Also, at the end of the last video, I hinted at this message being Satoshi's final mark on the internet, but there is actually one other message that exists from one of Satoshi's accounts that has also never been debunked. This message was sent at the peak of the Bitcoin scaling drama, and this message also comes from Satoshi's Vistomail email. Now, if you recall, satoshin@gmx.com was the email that was hacked, but Satoshi had another email address. and this email was almost exclusively used on the cryptography mailing list. Understanding the context of this message and what happened in 2015 is crucial in understanding why Satoshi hasn't revealed his identity, so please bear with me as we get into some of the technical aspects.
Look, this is really well
All of this
researched. I
begins
enjoy
with the
some
very
of the
first
stuff.
response to Satoshi's Bitcoin white paper on the cryptography mailing list. The very first message came from a person by the name of James A. Donald, and he said, "We very, very much need such a system, but the way I understand your proposal, it does not seem to scale to the required size." Fast forward to 2020, and this individual problem regarding Bitcoin scaling still remains.
So this part is kind of triggering for me. He talks about the Bitcoin block debate a little bit in this video, but he just makes this assumption that this still exists, but he doesn't mention anything about second layers. He doesn't talk about the actual the Lightning Network, and he kind of talks a little bit about Liquid. But again, like, I'm one of those people that I don't really care too much about Liquid. So for people who don't know, the Lightning Network is the solution that we're currently looking to use to scale Bitcoin to beyond Visa level transactions per second. And it's Bitcoin. It's just a extensible layer on Bitcoin. It is Bitcoin. And while, yes, it's still frustrating to use Bitcoin for the average person, to buy stuff with, it's not something that we've ignored and we want to, totally not solve. So anyway, he just presents this really simplistic, biased sort of view of what the block size debate was. So, but let's continue and see what he says.
If you've ever tried to send money with Bitcoin, you probably know the transaction process is far from instant. The reason this is
Yeah, far from instant, like 2 seconds. Oh my God, that's so far from instant. So, okay, I'll give it to him that sometimes when you're using Bitcoin, if you want a, if the network is clogged up and sometimes it's not instant, but for the most part, like, your transaction shows up instantly, depending on what wallet you use. But for the most part, a significant amount of the time you're using Bitcoin, it shows up. At least it doesn't confirm all the way, but it shows up. So you see the transaction, it happens instant. And if you pay a high enough fee, which you don't really need to, if you're making a base transaction for something small, if you're going to send like $100,000 or something, like the equivalent of a bank wire, you're going to pay like $30 at the bank, and it's going to take you like 72 hours to get it. So comparing that to Bitcoin, you can pay, like, sometimes the fees get high. Like, there was a point in Bitcoin at the very peak of popularity where the fee maybe got to $100 sometimes, but that was rare. And if you were just a little bit more patient and you could wait an hour, you would get it way down. So there's a lot of people that are like reporting on and misrepresenting how slow Bitcoin is. For the most point, if you're going to send somebody just some money, like peer-to-peer, it's going to show up on their side instantly. You're going to see it. And if you're sending $10 to somebody and the fee is like 5 cents, like, who cares? 5 cents is not bad. Even if it's 25 cents and it shows up instantly, like, the chances are non-existent that someone's going to double spend that transaction, or that transaction won't eventually get confirmed, as long as that person paid a fee and the blockchain is not super congested, which it hasn't really been. The fees have go up and down, but that is part of why we have a second layer being built and why there's other, like, extensions on top of the core base layer of the blockchain, so that it will get easier to use and it will be able to be used for, like, not really important transactions like coffees and stuff like that, with low fees and instant transactions. Lightning Network is milliseconds. So you pay for something with Lightning Bitcoin, and that is Bitcoin. It's not like an altcoin or something else. So this is just like, he's totally biased, and he comes at this whole thing from a perspective of taking the other side and not really even explaining the Bitcoin side. So let's just keep going.
The case is due to the fact that every time a Bitcoin transaction has to take place, it has to be verified inside blocks by the Bitcoin miners. Think of each block as a page in a book. A new block is added to the blockchain roughly every 10 minutes or so. One of the bottlenecks to scaling is that each transaction takes up a bit of space. Currently, there's a size limit that is set to 1 megabyte per block, which means the Bitcoin network can process around 7 transactions per second. As more people start to use Bitcoin, More transactions need to be verified, and since miners can only verify a certain amount at a time, the network hits a maximum capacity, which causes slowed transactions and higher transaction fees. Now, Satoshi added this 1 megabyte.
So again, he hasn't really explained it properly, but that is referring to base layer transactions. And MZ says also fee estimation is getting better, not yet perfect. Yeah, that's for individual wallets and stuff. But basically for the newest Bitcoiner, the person that maybe just was like searched Bitcoin halving and then bought some Bitcoin, they're kind of like thinking, oh, well, Bitcoin's not going to work. It's just BS. There are solutions being built for that. Not every transaction needs to be sent on the base layer. That's the point. And that's what the whole scaling debate was about. And anyways, we'll keep going.
Block limit in secret in 2010. And the reason he did this was to prevent something called a poison block attack. Essentially, if there was no block size limit, a miner could create a gigantic block, let's say the size of a terabyte. This would force all the other miners to download a massive file, effectively causing a denial of service attack. Now, this caused a divide in the community in 2015, as Satoshi had given instructions before he left that stated that the block size limit would increase in something called a hard fork. A hard fork is an update in which changes are so significant that it effectively...
I got to comment on this as well. Satoshi also commented on the idea that Bitcoin block space was kind of like a scarce resource, and users were going to get more tyrannical as time went by about increasing the size of the blocks. And he commented on the founder of EOS, Dan Larimer, posted on Bitcoin talk boards. I remember about, the I can't remember exactly what the post, but it was like the infamous one where Satoshi replied back and said, like, I don't have time. If you don't understand it, I don't have time to explain it or whatever. And there was discussion about, like, Satoshi even mentioned about his idea, and Hal Finney commented as well about how they saw scaling happening where it could be like second layers on top of Bitcoin. So he totally admits all this in the video. I wish this guy would do a video because it's really well done, like produced. The editing is great. The music is great. Very well researched, but only from that one perspective, totally leaving out the context of everything else, where Satoshi said he understood that users were going to get tyrannical about increasing the size of the blocks. He commented that they didn't want to have like BitDNS spamming Bitcoin. There was an obvious debate over like, oh, we can add all kinds of things to the Bitcoin blockchain, which is what Ethereum ended up doing in altcoins. And, the narrative from Satoshi at the time was, we don't need all that. We don't want to get spammed. Bitcoin, this is a scarce resource. This is we got to be good public stewards here for this public good, this Bitcoin blockchain. And just because we as early users can use the base layer block space for spam transactions doesn't mean we should. So they put the block size limit in there as well to prevent spammers from putting whatever they possibly wanted on the blockchain, because the whole point is to be able to keep it decentralized so that you can validate all the transactions. You can run a node yourself. Anybody with access to consumer grade hardware can run the node and validate everything. And if you have this absorbent cost involved in storage and bandwidth and all that by validating 10 years worth of spam transactions, then that pushes the cost of hardware to the edges and makes it so that only consumer or enterprise grade businesses and stuff can run the Bitcoin blockchain and process transactions, and that takes away the decentralized nature. Then it's like Napster again, not like BitTorrent. BitTorrent, it's illegal to download illegally files and movies and all that, but everybody still does it because it's decentralized. They can't shut you down from downloading movies. They can maybe go after you individually at the IP level. Like, you can get a letter sent from your internet provider saying, we detected you're using BitTorrent traffic, and we saw you downloaded this, whatever. They can do that, but there's too many people using BitTorrent that they can't shut the whole thing down because they don't have enough resources to go after everybody illegally downloading movies. It was not like a sanctioned thing to use Bitcoin. So there's still a chance that governments could attack Bitcoin. So we all need to be like aware of that and aware that decentralization is the most important part of this. and keeping the block size small enough that it won't exclude anybody from running their own node and validating the blockchain is the whole point of this. So it's not just because of the poison block, it's because of spam transactions. And people are going to say that, oh, there's no such thing as spam because if you pay a fee, then it's not spam. And that's 100% true. But for the, without explaining all that, I just mean like transactions that are pretty much like useless that you don't need to have, like the weather and all this stuff. It's like you don't need that on this public good, this resource that has one main purpose, which is decentralized money, sovereignty, censorship resistant store of value, and payments and free speech money. That's what Bitcoin is. It's not weather data and like tiny insignificant transactions. If it's going to scale as best as possible to be able to hit as many people in the world as possible to use to opt out of fiat money and opt into decentralized money that's a apolitical money system, we have to keep it decentralized. That's the most important thing. And so anyways, this comment just flippantly saying that it was just a temporary thing to add the 1 megabyte limit and then they were going to increase it. That's not how it went. So again, this guy's just totally presenting a one-sided biased view of how it went down. So let's continue.
It creates a separate currency. If Bitcoin was going to accommodate more people, then this issue needed to be addressed. And that brings us to 2015.
Yeah, it was the Lightning Network.
See that bright brain full of activity? That's a healthy 18-year-old brain. Mine is
ads.
55 years old and
I can't skip it
all the time. I had a million excuses for my bogginess. I was just tired.
Oh, I'm on the wrong
distracted
screen.
Having a moment.
Hold on. There we go.
(2015) is the year that Bitcoin saw a civil war. Gavin Andresen, the man who Satoshi had put in charge, and another developer by the name of Mike Hearn took it upon themselves to provide a solution for the Bitcoin scaling dilemma. In June of 2015, Gavin proposed Bitcoin Improvement Protocol 101. This proposal sought to increase the block size to 8 megabytes and double every 2 years if the miners were able to reach a 75% consensus and upgrade their software. If this fork was to succeed, then Bitcoin XT would actually overtake Bitcoin as the main currency. Many people agreed that this block size limit needed to be raised at some point in time, but the hard part here is getting everyone to agree on one proposal. Gavin's proposal was quite popular, and while it wasn't perfect, many people saw it as a way to deal with the oncoming influx of new individuals to the network. However, many of the other developers were not on board with this decision, particularly one for-profit company involved in Bitcoin's development. What you need to understand here is that Gavin expanded Bitcoin's team from 2011 to 2014. And throughout this entire time, Gavin and the Bitcoin Foundation were playing the regulatory game. The Bitcoin Foundation, to which Gavin was a founder.
I mean, he doesn't even mention here that Gavin went to the CIA. He doesn't even talk about, I don't think he mentions in the video at all that Satoshi disappeared when Gavin Andresen went and talked to the government. And it was like pretty much that's what drove Satoshi away, was the government got involved and Gavin started, like through the Bitcoin Foundation, started to try to talk to governments and stuff. And it was at the time very risky because we were still at the point where Bitcoin was small enough that it could have been stopped. And if they had arrested the founder, then that could have stopped it. Bitcoin now has grown too big to be shut down, just like BitTorrent has. But back then it was a very serious threat. And that's why they didn't want WikiLeaks using Bitcoin, because it would have drawn too much government attention before it had a chance to like seed among enough people to make the decentralized network stronger. And that whole impetus of Bitcoin was decentralized, unseizable, uncensorable peer-to-peer cash and digital gold, both of those things. And the only way that you get peer-to-peer decentralized cash is if it can't be taken over by a cadre of miners and businesses, and then the government can just go after those miners and businesses. If there's only a handful of miners and businesses that like influence and run Bitcoin, then if the government did want to attack Bitcoin, they only have to knock on like 10 or 11 doors. So that was the whole thing. It wasn't that Blockstream was this like unknown entity that just came out of nowhere. It was all the Bitcoin developers. Like Blockstream was the people that care about Bitcoin the most that just couldn't afford to live anymore because Bitcoin hadn't yet quite hit success. So all these developers had Bitcoin. They were all interested in the success of Bitcoin. If you think that these developers that cared so much to work on Bitcoin for free for years preferred Blockstream stock over Bitcoins, you're crazy. Like, think about that. If you're into Bitcoin, if you've been down the rabbit hole, you understand that Bitcoin becomes a like obsessive thing, and you start to just like price things in Bitcoin, or you think like, I just got to get more Bitcoin, and you have a target you want to get to, and like you start to evangelize Bitcoin and give Bitcoin away and stuff, because Bitcoin is like an activist sort of philosophical movement, not just a stock or something like that. Like if you're buying Apple shares and you think Apple's going to go up, you're not going to start evangelizing and everything. Bitcoin, once you go down the rabbit hole, it's different. There's something else. It's not like a stock. So I totally understand that this guy making this video would think in terms of companies and corporations and stocks and all that. But listen, Blockstream started to fund the developers that were already working on Bitcoin. They raised money and supported the people who were already working on Bitcoin to continue working on Bitcoin. It's not like what Craig Wright tried to do. Craig Wright created nChain, and then all these unknown random developers, he had them on staff, and then they tried to come in and build on Bitcoin. And it's like they were never even involved in Bitcoin before. That's a totally separate thing. So if Blockstream was just a bunch of random Silicon Valley coders that were raised $100 million and came in and tried to build Bitcoin stuff, then yeah, for sure, there'd be like, what's the ulterior motive there? But because Blockstream was made up of Bitcoiners, and they even have like a clause in their contracts that was like, they can go against Blockstream if they can build personal projects. And if Blockstream, if they want to just leave Blockstream for personal reasons or moral reasons or philosophical reasons, then they can, and they still get paid for like a year or something like that. So, I mean, Blockstream was totally set up to be pro Bitcoin. And I 100% in my core believe that all the developers that were working for Blockstream were way more interested in seeing the value of their Bitcoins go up than their Blockstream shares. Sure, there's some incentive there, and the investors of Blockstream obviously wanted a return, but I don't think any of the people that were working for Blockstream on the developer side cared more about their Blockstream shares. And I've also said in the past that if Blockstream disappeared, I don't think it would be an impact on Bitcoin. It's just a company. There's lots of companies that develop Bitcoin. There's Chain Code Labs, MIT's developing on Bitcoin. There's lots of independent developers. Square now is another one that's hiring developers. Anyways, listen, this conspiracy sort of like narrative towards Blockstream is evil. This was the whole ridiculous nonsense that caused a lot of people to lose their credibility in 2017, because they started just pitching conspiracies and stuff. And a lot of people had lost their reputations because of this conspiracy narratives and nonsense. Oh, what's up, Real Bit Lawyer? Oh, it's Chris, Real Bit Lawyer. Yeah. MZ said it's the difference between a job and a passion, which is totally hard to comprehend if you're not down the Bitcoin rabbit hole yet. But let's continue and see what he says. And also, I got to say, too, I got to comment on the Bitcoin Foundation. Like, every single person that was on the Bitcoin Foundation ended up starting a shitcoin. So everybody, I can't think of one person. And this, as a Bitcoiner and like a Bitcoin maximalist kind of, where I believe Bitcoin's going to be the winner and most of the other cryptocurrencies are more like Forex trading or stock trading or whatever. It's not actually like a passion or an activism thing. It's more like, oh, this one might go up 2x or something like that. You know, people get involved because of FOMO into the altcoins because they want to like be a trader or whatever. But it's a way to make money. Like you can print your own money. And a lot of these people tried to redo Bitcoin because maybe they didn't buy enough at 25 cents. I mean, these people were all in early, and just because they were in early doesn't mean that they kept their Bitcoin and held their Bitcoin until it hit 10,000 or 20,000. A lot of early Bitcoiners either lost their Bitcoins or they sold too early, or they got hacked, or they just greed took over. I mean, that's what Ethereum and Ripple and all these other cryptocurrencies, it's just mostly driven by greed. And that's not necessarily bad. I mean, I understand there's an incentive for someone that's a business-minded person, who's an entrepreneurial person, once they see the success of Bitcoin, to get it in their heads that, hey, I can just redo this. I can actually use all my influence and all my connections now, and I can make Bitcoin too. And I can launch it, and we'll call it Ethereum, or we'll call it Bitcoin Cash, and we'll just remake Bitcoin, or we'll do it with a new feature, privacy, and we'll call it Zcash. We'll make it 21 million coins. We'll have it 10-minute blocks. We'll do all the same stuff as Bitcoin, but we'll just redo it, but with a new bunch of investors. And then we can dump all of our crypto on all the Bitcoiners and all the people coming into Bitcoin. That's what happened. And everybody that was on the Bitcoin Foundation ended up starting their own shitcoin. So what do you say to that? I mean, that's not mentioned at all in this video. These people were business people. They're entrepreneurs. They're driven by making money. So even Jeff Garzik, who was one of the biggest haters of altcoins, made 3 or 4 altcoins. So like, greed and money changes people's morals. So, you know, a lot of Bitcoin developers, most Bitcoin developers, do everything for Bitcoin. That's why you'll see a lot of Bitcoiners just flat out say things like altcoins are scams, they're all scammers, and all that stuff. It's tribalism, yes, but it's 100% true. The people on the Bitcoin Foundation were not necessarily aligned to Bitcoin. And that proved to be true, because they all most of them created their own altcoin projects. So you can't argue that. And he doesn't even mention anything like that. So that's another reason why I feel this is totally unbiased. He's presenting the Bitcoin Foundation as if it was like, of course they did good work in the early days. And, you know, there was some scammy sort of things that happened in the early days with the Bitcoin Foundation, but most of it was just people trying to make money and trying to like milk clout and influence. And sure, maybe they did some good stuff, but Satoshi disappeared when Gavin went to the feds. So he didn't mention that. So anyway, it's just bias, total bias. So let's keep watching this thing.
Was created to improve Bitcoin's reputation after the Silk Road gave it its criminal background. The Bitcoin Foundation was the one hit with threats for running an unlicensed money business, and the Bitcoin Foundation was the one who testified against lawmakers successfully. Satoshi ran away at the first mention of the government, while Gavin's foundation played it correctly and lobbied for the right regulation.
Oh, come on. Give me a break. That's so ridiculous. He paints the picture. Okay, so he does mention it, but he says Satoshi ran away at the first mention of the government, and Gavin played it the right way. Give me a break. I mean, how biased is that? So after everything I just told you, can you obviously see this dude's bias? He has his mind made up. He's not looking at this from a neutral point of view. He already said, like at the beginning, that there was no real need and reason to be anonymous. Well, maybe this guy just doesn't understand all the things that has happened in the past when it comes to the government not liking competing currencies. Maybe he just doesn't get it, but hopefully you do, and hopefully you can see through this bias.
While Satoshi Nakamoto invented Bitcoin, Gavin's stewardship made it successful. But after all this,
my God, give me a break.
Gavin would step down
Okay,
as the
hold
developer
on.
to focus on.
No, Gavin did not make Bitcoin successful. That's ridiculous. Gavin did some stuff for sure, okay? But Gavin was not anything to do with like the reason why Bitcoin was successful. The users and the other core developers and the early entrepreneurs and stuff, they are the reason why Bitcoin is successful. It's not because of Gavin and Andresen. It's not because of anyone. It's not because of Roger Ver. It's not because of Trace Mayer. It's not because of Max Kaiser or any of these people, but they're all influential in their own ways. But to just say, what's up, Bitcoin motorists? Nice COVID mask. For him to just say that just to present it like Gavin made it successful is just ridiculous. He doesn't understand what makes Bitcoin successful. You who are watching this video, you make Bitcoin successful. users were the ones that made Bitcoin successful in the early days. Users were the ones that made Bitcoin successful over the Bcash hard fork attempt and the cadre of the collusion between the biggest miners and the biggest corporations trying to take over development of Bitcoin. It was through the user activated soft fork and the users that made Bitcoin successful over the corporate interests. So the users are what made Bitcoin successful. And to say that Gavin made it successful, I'm triggered by that. I'm sorry. We are Bitcoin. That's right. All right, let's keep watching.
On promotion. 6 months after Gavin would step down, Blockstream.
What did he say
But
there?
After all this, in April of 2014,
Vlad tells CoinDesk via email he was surprised to be offered the role and hadn't expected Gavin to step down. Well, that was another thing too. If you notice at the bottom of this video here, let me full screen that. Right at the very bottom, it says, I noticed that Gavin had been much less active in the GitHub project. So this must have been 2015 or so, I guess. 2014, July 2014, it says up there. So yeah, Gavin kind of like stopped developing for Bitcoin. And eventually when, you know, Gavin was coming out as a total big blocker and was wanting to be like the dictator or whatever, the like Bitcoin Cash now, they have the what the hell is that phrasing? The benevolent dictator, right? So Gavin wanted to be the benevolent dictator of Bitcoin, and that wasn't happening, and he wasn't developing as much. And then he came out and said Craig Wright was Satoshi, so they revoked his commit access. So I mean, Craig Wright is obviously a liar and not Satoshi. So when Gavin's saying he's Satoshi, then obviously people thought maybe he's hacked or maybe he's just totally blown his lid or flipped his lid or whatever. So anyways, let's just keep watching this.
Gavin would step down as the lead developer to focus on promotion. 6 months after Gavin would step down, Blockstream was founded, a for-profit company among a group of top developers. Essentially, their proposal would encourage transactions to be done off-chain, where Blockstream could pocket the fees instead of the miners. You can find a wide variety of opinions on Blockstream online, but I think it's naive to think that venture capital being injected into the development of Bitcoin wouldn't change the goals a little bit.
Okay, so let me address that one. I mean, I've already mentioned this. I've already talked about how Blockstream's motivations were probably the purest of any of the companies working on Bitcoin. Definitely more aligned with Bitcoin's success than Coinbase or any of these other exchanges because they're developers. But also, of course, investors are going to want to get a return. Of course, anybody investing in anything is going to want to get a return. And while Blockstream, he's trying to say here that the investors changed the narrative, and this was a common like propaganda line from the big blockers during the split, was that Blockstream wanted to keep Bitcoin's blocks small so that they could make the sidechain fees. And that's BS because, I mean, yeah, sure, there's potential that could have been the case, but Blockstream is not Bitcoin. For one, there's two logical fallacies here. Blockstream is not Bitcoin. There's other developers independent. There's other developer companies like Chaincode Labs and the MIT Bitcoin group, and like these developers working for Blockstream are morally and philosophically aligned with Bitcoin since the beginning. They were already working on Bitcoin. The development and decisions and everything happen on the mailing list, not in the Blockstream boardroom. And I don't even think they have a boardroom because they're just a bunch of cypherpunk coders. So to say that like these investors somehow now are dictating the path that Bitcoin takes is not true. And actually a lot of the Blockstream investors are pissed off because they didn't get a good return as far as I know. I mean, there was some public things on Twitter where even one of the founders and like a couple of the early investors were like annoyed because when Bitcoin mooned to 20K, they were mad that their Blockstream shares didn't go up as much. So, I mean, that's just being butthurt that you didn't buy enough Bitcoin. So it's just VCs. Like there was tons of VC activity happening where investors were trying to invest in Bitcoin companies. And so just to single out Blockstream and say that Blockstream is the developers of Bitcoin. It's not true. So Chris says he'll watch the rest later. Thanks, man. But this isn't for you, Chris. This is for the noobs who are just finding out about Bitcoin, and they're getting a bad view of what Bitcoin is and a biased FUD-like take on what Bitcoin is. But send it to those people, Chris. You already know all this stuff. So that, that's just not. It possibly could, sure. I'll give it to you. Sure, there's a question there. So, and I gotta say, for this guy is not totally biased. Okay, this guy is not as bad as the big blockers got. I mean, I think he does have good intentions, but I think he's biased. So I don't think this guy that made this video is as biased as like the big blockers were, because they came up with some really ridiculous conspiracy theories in 2007 and 16. And this guy's not going down that road. So thank you for not going down the road of like super conspiracies and all that stuff. So for sure, this is not like total bullshit, but it's just a misunderstanding of how Bitcoin works, the ethos behind Bitcoin, the incentives of the Bitcoin developers, and really the story of how it all played out, and the reason why the blocks were kept small versus the blocks being just arbitrarily raised. And the CEO of Blockstream, Adam Back, even was on that side of raising the block size if it was within consensus. He thought it should be raised to 2 megabytes, then 4 megabytes, then 8 megabytes. So Adam Back was even on like the side of let's raise the block size if it's within consensus. And he leaves, maybe he doesn't, maybe this creator of this video doesn't understand the whole within consensus thing, but he totally doesn't talk about that. He just thinks that Satoshi put a temporary limit on the blocks, and the one side of Bitcoiners tried to take over to keep the blocks small so they could make fees. Listen, the whole strategy is if Bitcoin gets big enough anyways, the fees that are being used for the side chain are not going to be taking away and eating away from the fees that are being used on the base layer. The base layer fees are going to go up. So the miners are actually going to like make more money if they can succeed with making the side chains for these separate use cases, like for trading and arbitrage and all these like professional use cases. If they can attract the financiers and stuff like that to come in, and Wall Street and stuff like that to use the side chain and still retain like Bitcoin properties without creating a shitcoin, that helps Bitcoin. And the miners are not going to lose fees because the more people are using Bitcoin to use second layers and side chains, the more they're also using the base layer. So the miners are still making money. I mean, it still fits within Satoshi's game theory incentive model. What doesn't fit within the game theory is what Bcash did. BCH split, and then there was a war between BCH ABC and BCH SV, and they totally threw Nakamoto consensus out the window, and they put checkpoints, and they colluded with exchanges, and they centralized it so that they won. Like the BCH ABC guys cheated Nakamoto consensus and put like an emergency like stop in there so that nobody could fork the chain. The guy doesn't go into the whole mining concept, but it's game theory of incentives and decentralized securing of the blockchain. As long as 51% of the miners are honest, then Bitcoin can still keep going and new blocks can keep being built. And when the big blockers didn't get their way and they left Bitcoin, they actually couldn't. It was all these like egotistical characters that wanted power and control, and they couldn't agree either. So they had another disagreement within their own ecosystem or community or whatever, and then they forked within themselves. And then what did they do? The first thing they did was they centralized. They cheated Nakamoto consensus. They added checkpoints, and then they said we won the fork war because they cheated. So you don't think those developers, every one of those big blockers, were the type of people that would have cheated Bitcoin and bastardized Bitcoin and added checkpoints and tried to like cheat Nakamoto consensus? Bitcoin is the only free market currency. It's the only free market technology, really. I mean, Bitcoin Cash is the example of what happens when you allow centralizers to take over a blockchain. They start colluding and they start changing things that a government, if it was big enough, could just totally take advantage of. So these guys proved, the BCH people and the big blockers, the people that were like Gavin and all those guys, because Gavin ended up supporting BCH and Mike Hearn and all those guys, they all went over to the BCH side because they couldn't get their way in Bitcoin. And they're just too butthurt to just get over their ego and proceed with Bitcoin, that they make their own altcoin. So what did they prove? They proved that that's what they were going to do to Bitcoin too. It wasn't about a 2 megabyte upgrade. It wasn't about an 8 megabyte upgrade. It was about gigablocks and like pushing Bitcoin to data centers and like massive supercomputers and stuff like that you and I couldn't afford. We can't run, we don't have enough power or cheap enough electricity or big enough bandwidth or whatever to be able to run a Bitcoin like big enough for the world to validate everybody's transactions. Yeah, it's all about those gigamegs. That was something funny that Calvin Ayre said. So anyway, I got a little bit triggered there, but hopefully this gives you some context. If you're new to Bitcoin, hopefully this gives you some context on some things that are missing in this video. It's not as easy. It's not as simple as this guy's laying it out. Zero mention of the importance of self-validation in that video. Exactly. That's the idea, at least, that the Bitcoin blockchain is kept small enough that we can run our own nodes and validate the transactions ourselves. The same concept as BitTorrent. If you have the ability to be a node and to have your vote and have your say and have influence over the Bitcoin blockchain, then it's less likely that it'll be taken over by corporations and governments. If you don't have the ability to vote, it's like having your gun rights taken away in the United States. Like, as long as you have the ability to have a gun, then the government and, the fascists and stuff are going to be less likely to try to impose really strict, crazy rules. But as long as once you take away the rights to have any guns, then you don't have any options. It's the same with the node. The node is like the equivalent of the Second Amendment of Bitcoin. I mean, it's not, if you can't run a node, you don't have a say when the government comes for the network. So let's keep watching this.
So is Blockstream's goal to generate profit or to increase the value of Bitcoin?
So we actually have green address also, the consumer wallet,
right.
the mobile wallet. But yeah, largely right now, all of our stuff is free. We're mainly focused on R&D. We have been very focused on R&D. We'll have Liquid coming out.
I got a comment here as well. Unfortunately, green address blows. Like, the one thing about Blockstream is that they're doing everything from like the cypherpunk perspective, but it's getting a little bit better. Green address, I recommend everybody use it. Unfortunately, like, there's other wallets like Bread Wallet and stuff that are just so much better. There's like way more beautiful. But in terms of Bitcoin, they're not as good. So Bread Wallet is not aligned to Bitcoin like green address is. So I just wish that Blockstream had better UX and like marketing people, because green address blows in terms of its feel and its UX, but in terms of its usage and usefulness and alignment to Bitcoin, it's the best. So yeah, the BTC game, what's up, man? Just seeing everybody complain about Bread Wallet of late. Yeah, I've been complaining about Bread Wallet to myself, just being like, because they'll send me text messages or notifications telling me Bitcoin went up 20% today. And like, I'm trying not to watch the price of Bitcoin because it stresses me out sometimes. And then I get a freaking notification, Bitcoin's down 12%. And then my day is ruined. It's stressful holding Bitcoin. Just don't watch the price. Let's see. Let's keep going. So anyways, this is Samson Mao, the chief strategy officer, I believe his title is, of Blockstream, and he's also like a controversial Twitter character, but he's a pro Bitcoiner, and he's one of the people that exposed a lot of shenanigans that was happening on the big blocker side. So he's an invaluable resource to the Bitcoin community, and you should probably follow him on Twitter. Take his posts with like a bit of a grain of salt. I mean, he's funny and he's kind of like an insider or whatever, but he's definitely has good information that he posts sometimes.
early next year, hopefully, fingers crossed. And that will be a commercial service that will generate revenue. But the goal is everything will generate revenue. It's not just we're going to build stuff for free forever.
Now, getting back to Bitcoin XT in 2015.
So I guess he was saying something. There's nothing nefarious about that.
There would be no point in developing.
Yeah, there's nothing nefarious about the company wanting to make profits. At least they're honest about it. Like, they're honest about it, but the most of the big block companies are trying to pretend that they're in it for other reasons. So I mean, yeah, good on Samson for being honest. Like, he's telling it how it is. He's not trying to virtue signal and do all this garbage. So anyway, let's keep watching.
Side chains, and Blockstream's investors would probably be pretty upset. This was a coup, because not only would this force blocks to get larger, it would also give developmental control back to Gavin and Mike Hearn, as Mike was the only one with commit access to Bitcoin XT. Now I want you to pay attention to the following statement given from Blockstream CEO. When he was asked if the blockchain forks and Bitcoin XT prevails as the dominant chain, then that also establishes a new core team of developers, with Mike Hearn and Gavin Andresen in sole custody of the source code. How would this change the long-term governance of Bitcoin? Adam Back responded, Gavin naively thinks he'll do a coup, force the issue, and then invite people to participate in the coup. However, Mike states in the Bitcoin XT website that he is the final decision maker, so it's clearly intended to change the decision-making process, and Mike has not been without bias and controversy.
That makes perfect
sense. It's quite unlikely from indications I see that any of the core people who maintain Bitcoin security will participate in Bitcoin XT. It is therefore not clear that Bitcoin XT will have the resources or expertise to maintain its safety and security.
That makes perfect sense to me. Let's keep going. I like it.
On a small side note, I managed to dig up some of the private conversations that were taking place in June of 2015. One of the really interesting logs I found came from June 16th of that year. In the months leading up to Gavin making this proposal, he was trying to raise the block size for a very long time. Blockstream CEO Adam Back was acting like they were in favor of increasing the block size, but they were just acting like he needed to go through the consensus process. But they essentially would never get back to Gavin. They were fully aware that this would never reach consensus among the 5 developers with commit access, because 2 out of those 5 are Blockstream co-founders, and they were basically gaslighting Gavin to waste his time while they could work on their sidechain solution. I've copied this conversation over so they can't delete it, and it's in a paste bin. Commit access.
Okay, let's see here. So we got five people, and they said 2 of them won't. No, they said they wouldn't get consensus. And actually, you know, Adam should be on here too, because Adam was interested. Adam, the CEO of Blockstream, was interested in doing a larger size block if it was within consensus. And, you know, Vlad also had that same opinion. It looks like it was, he would do it if it was in consensus, but you know, if it's not in consensus, that's the whole thing about Bitcoin and Satoshi's game theory, and that's just the way it has to be. It has to be done in consensus, because you're free to fork Bitcoin and make your own altcoin, but then it's an altcoin. It's not Bitcoin. Bitcoin doesn't cease existing, so Bitcoin continues as Bitcoin. So most of these people were trying to not rift Bitcoin and wanted to do things in consensus, conservatively in consensus. So it doesn't surprise me that level-headed logicians like that would take that line of thinking and say like, oh, well, since we don't want to destroy Bitcoin, we don't want to do a contentious fork because that would likely destroy Bitcoin. We're going to be against this. And just because they use that logic, all these people, Garzik and Gavin, well, actually not all of them, just Garzik and Gavin, Jeff Garzik, ended up making their own, or at least supporting, like Jeff made a couple altcoins, you know, after saying publicly many times that he thought they were scams and being against altcoins, he ended up making a bunch of them. And Gavin ended up supporting the altcoin BCH. So it shows you really where the intentions were in the end. It was about power and control and greed and money. It was not about Bitcoin. At least maybe it was about Bitcoin in a tertiary or secondarily, but the primary motivation was not Bitcoin, because if it was, they would still be on Bitcoin, and they're not. So let's keep going.
because 2 out of those 5 are Blockstream co-founders, and they were basically gaslighting Gavin to waste his time.
And they're not Blockstream co-founders. They're Bitcoin developers that just also happen to be now, at this point, being paid to continue working on Bitcoin by Blockstream. So they're not, it's just because they're developers now employed by Blockstream doesn't mean anything. We've been through that. I've already said that. So I'm just reminding that point. Let's keep going.
While they could work on their sidechain solution. I've copied this conversation over so they can't delete it, and it's in a paste bin that you can find in the description. In this chat log, Mike Hearn references how he's heard from investors that Blockstream has the power to stop changes from going through in Bitcoin. Gavin mentions that this conversation would go a lot better if we could all assume that we all had the best intentions. And in this chat, he references Bitcoin being controlled by a council of elders, despite the fact that a vast majority was in favor of increasing the block size. I will.
Okay, so this is all just like hearsay. This is all just like people just talking shit. It's not just because they say that doesn't mean that's true. It's just people shit talking in a chat. So anyway,
Leave this in the description for you guys to read through, as I think it gives you plenty of insight to what pushed Gavin to try and do a coup. To be fair, I want to recognize that both sides here were vying for control over the project, but as it starts to play out, I lean more towards Gavin having better intentions.
oh,
The richest man
okay,
in the world,
yay, an ad.
which is responsible for over 50%.
Gavin, he's saying Gavin had better intentions, but I've already gone through the fact that Gavin and these guys were all more motivated by ego and like reputation and money. And Gavin even endorsed Craig Wright as Satoshi, which was totally ridiculous. And yeah, he's like the perfectly good example of the type of like manipulation this guy's doing in this video. Like he's making it seem like these guys are going to delete the conversation now because he exposed this conversation. There's pages and pages and pages of shit talking and chats and forums and all that. And just because this dude's going to post it doesn't mean it's going to get deleted. Like he thinks that he's using that as a tactic. And thanks for picking that up. He's using that as a tactic to make you think you've just discovered something secret. And, you know, it's like, it's just people shit talking. Ooh, Thamos. Here we go. Get the popcorn.
I know this is a bit confusing, so I want to do a brief recap of what we've covered thus far. Basically, by this time, Bitcoin has become successful and no longer fears regulation from the government.
Not
Since
true.
It no longer fears the same regulation, the primary focus is scaling the network so more people can send money on it. Satoshi originally planned on having a hard fork, which would create a new currency with a larger block size higher than 1 megabyte. A group of developers funded by venture capital plans on profiting by keeping the block size small. Gavin likely realizes this is happening and creates his Bitcoin Improvement Proposal 101 to try and regain control. For this to happen, Gavin has to get 75% of the miners to start using his version of the software. And finally, Blockstream CEO made a subtle threat about security towards Bitcoin XT. Now, hopefully you understand what's going on, because shit's about to get way more.
Did he say that was a threat? He didn't. That wasn't a threat. What's the threat? Is he talking about the thing he just said? Oh my God. He said that Adam made that as a threat? That's so stupid. That wasn't a threat. That was just a logical like thing to say. I don't know. What's the word I'm saying? What's the word I'm looking for? That's just something he said that's true. It's not a threat. It's true. That would have happened because most of the people would be staying on the Bitcoin core side, and the developers and the miners and stuff wouldn't go to Bitcoin XT. Therefore, it wouldn't be secure. And it was true, because what ended up happening, this guy maybe doesn't know this, or he just didn't put it on there on purpose, but it wasn't secure. When the fork was supposed to happen with BTC1, Jeff Garzik's like 2x upgrade that was supposed to happen, that was all the whole 2017 split was about. There was a bug in the code and it would have shut the Bitcoin network down. So BTC1 broke itself, even though the SegWit 2x movement was defeated by the no 2x guys and like the users and the developers that were refusing to upgrade with the miners and the businesses, because they didn't really care about Bitcoin as much as they cared about saving money and making money. They wanted to support Garzik's big block code, which was more like a benevolent dictatorship as well, like what Garzik or what Gavin wanted and what BCH has now. And if it had have gone through, it would have broke Bitcoin because it like had a stupid misspelling in the code that was off by 1 or something with one of the blocks. So the block that it was supposed to fork, it broke when it's supposed to happen. So yeah, it was they didn't have the expertise, and BCH does not have the security now, and that's who the Bitcoin big block guys were. The BCH people now are those big block guys, so they don't have the proper security. So they have to add checkpoints and cheat Nakamoto consensus and have emergency difficulty adjustments and like completely change things so that their security doesn't break. So they're cheating and changing Bitcoin. So that wasn't a threat. That was just a good observation. It was prescient, actually, because that's what ended up happening. So anyway, this guy probably doesn't know this, but I hope this dude watches my video because I'm teaching him quite a bit.
Subtle threat about security towards Bitcoin XT. Now, hopefully you understand what's going on because shit's about to get way more hectic.
Ooh, shit's about to get hectic.
After Gavin posted BIP 101, it really created a sense of urgency to update Bitcoin. Nobody wanted to get left behind, and miners needed to cast their vote and make an informed decision. Naturally, for people to stay up to date, they had to go to one of Bitcoin's main discussion boards. And at the time, r/Bitcoin was the main hub for discussion. But where this gets incredibly sketchy is when moderators of r/Bitcoin ban all discussion of Bitcoin XT. Now, I'm no genius here, but how is anyone supposed to make an informed decision if they can't discuss the topic?
I'm not gonna interrupt this part. I'm gonna fast forward.
Saying, well, why wouldn't people just go somewhere else? Well, when you consider that both Bitcoin Talk and r/Bitcoin are the only main discussion boards with any traffic, and they're both owned by the same person, and that person may or may not have had financial dealings with Blockstream, and the thing you're voting on is time sensitive, so you don't have time to create a new community, altogether makes it look like you're trying to force your will on the community. I mean, when you have someone directly on Blockstream's payroll stating things like manipulating public opinion isn't censorship, Thamos is one of the most anti-censorship people I know, and I'm not aware of any evidence that r/Bitcoin engages in censorship. And then a conversation comes out with Thamos stating that the way I operate r/Bitcoin is consistent with self-ownership. r/Bitcoin is a private centralized website. I am free to operate it as I wish. I'm under no ethical obligation to allow total free speech just because I believe in self-ownership. And my personal favorite, this is in accordance with my principles. I don't take free speech to be an ethical axiom. It's a private centralized website. I am free to operate it as I wish. I'm under no ethical obligation to allow total free speech just because I believe in self-ownership.
Okay, and then he says, and you are free to either convince me otherwise or go elsewhere. This doesn't give me any inherent control over Bitcoin except the ability I have to influence free individuals. So this looks like an interesting philosophical discussion here between this person and Thamos. Now, I have kind of a nuanced view on this. I also kind of agree that our Bitcoin was doing censorship, and I kind of believe that Thamos and our Bitcoin fueled Roger Ver's hatred of Core and like all the conspiracy theory narratives and all that stuff. So I'm kind of on his side here. I kind of agree that there was censorship on our Bitcoin. The only difference is I don't think it gives a difference. I don't think it makes a difference because at this point in time, Reddit was not really that influential anymore. It was more so just like a place to go talk about Bitcoin, like post memes and talk about the price and like stuff like that. It wasn't actually where the real discussion was happening. It was just people that wanted to talk about Bitcoin. We're going to our Bitcoin sometimes, but any of the real discussions were happening on IRC, on the message boards, on the mailing list, on Twitter. Like most of the real discussion was happening there. There was not much actual meaningful discussion. The only thing that was happening on our Bitcoin was the big blockers trying to influence people and push and spam and non-stop incessantly posting shit about their vision of Bitcoin, which was not in consensus. So yeah, what would you do if you were the moderator of a thread of a forum and these egotistical maniacs would not stop posting stuff constantly? Would you just give up and let them post if they were just consistently like using bots and stuff to upvote their own comments and repost things and not give it up? And like when the moderators would ask them to stop talking about this, it's not in consensus. We don't want the discussion to be about this here. Yeah, I kind of agree. It's a shitty position to be in, and they chose the censorship route, which sucks because anybody that's been censored before gets pissed off. I know I've been censored like on Facebook groups and stuff, even where like the local marketplace Facebook group or something like that. I'll post something on there, and this like person that runs the Facebook page or is a moderator of the Facebook page will like remove my posts for my boots or something, and I'll just get pissed off because I'm like, who are you like to say that this doesn't belong here? I'm just trying to participate. I'm trying to give my opinion or whatever. Any kind of censorship triggers somebody. It like eats away at your ego, makes you pissed off. It makes you feel like you're gonna have to revolt and like rage against this perceived machine of censorship. So yes, I totally agree that our Bitcoin censoring Roger Ver and a bunch of big blockers was partly what fueled the BCH split and all the animosity between Roger and the big blockers. But they're not innocent. So I don't know what the solution is, honestly. Like, our Bitcoin was not the place where meaningful discussion was happening. Yes, it had a lot of people subscribe to it. No, it wasn't as important as this guy's making it out to seem like. Yes, they did censorship. And yes, that sucks. And yes, they Thamos contributed to the animosity and like hurting Roger's ego and like probably making him want to rage against Bitcoin Core and all this stuff. But Thamos is not Bitcoin. Thamos is not a developer for Bitcoin Core. Thamos is not like, I don't think Thamos himself is like a fascist or something that is against free speech. I just think he got sick and tired of these people spamming his forum. And Roger tried to bribe Reddit to buy the freaking forum from him multiple times. So Roger and the big blockers are no way better shape than Thamos is. They created like deceptively registered r/BTC and just constantly use it to just shit on BTC, and they engage in censorship. They vote brigade you when you go on there and you're a Bitcoiner. When you go on r/BTC Bitcoin, the ticker for BCH for Bcash is BCH, Bitcoin Cash, but they use r/BTC. That's just an idea of how deceptive these people are. And they're like marketing guys. They're not technical people. Like the leaders are like egotistical, manipulative marketing guys and like growth hackers and shit like that. They're not like the cypherpunks that run Bitcoin and RBTC or our Bitcoin. So what these guys do on RBTC is constantly shit on Bitcoin. How and censor you. So there's plenty of people that go on RBTC and try to debate with the people there, and they'll get vote brigaded. They have bots that say this person posts on our Bitcoin, and like that's a signal for them to downvote you. And then they have this script on there that says if you get a certain amount of downvotes, you can't post once every 10 minutes. So they can post as much as replies as they want on their side, but you as the counterpoint can only reply once every 10 minutes. So basically they know what they're doing. They try to drive you away from the forum and present only a biased view, which is their view, because you have rate limiting on your posts, you have downvote brigades, you have a huge echo chamber there, and then they just straight up censor you. So if you like don't give up after all that censorship, they just ban you. So r/BTC is not any better. In fact, it's worse because it starts from the very beginning as deceptive. r/BTC. It's not about BTC. If they wanted to be like fair and moral and all that, and if they cared about censorship, they would give RBTC to us and use RBCH or our Bitcoin Cash and stop using RBTC as 100% propaganda tool to shit on Bitcoin and censor Bitcoiners. So yes, this is a complicated issue. I kind of agree with the guy, but I don't think that he's got it right. And the Bitcoin forums as well, Thamos owns that too, was popular in like 2011, 12 maybe. And then it sort of turned into a shit show. It sort of turned into just people pumping altcoins and doing ICOs and like talking about like their businesses and doing stock investing and like bit stocks, and like it just turned into a shit show. and the Bitcoin forum became irrelevant too. I mean, people would post there, but they would mostly just cross post there. So our Bitcoin and the Bitcoin Talk forum were popular in like 2011 or 12, but by 2015, 16, it was not anywhere where the meaningful conversation was happening. And that mostly happens now on Twitter, to be honest. And there's nobody that's controlling Twitter except for Jack Dorsey, who's also a Bitcoiner. Yay. Okay, let's keep going on this.
And my personal favorite, this is in accordance with my principles. I don't take free speech to be an ethical axiom. There would have been no way to prove that this conversation was real until Thamos acknowledged it himself. Now, this is a complete 180 from what Thamos used to say before Blockstream was founded.
He's not been secretive about this. This is another like manipulative tactic this guy used. There would have been no way to prove that this bombshell comment was real except for Thamos admitted it. Thamos said it in the first place, and then he admitted it. He said it in that other post. Thamos has never been secretive about the fact that he doesn't want big block spammers ruining his forum. And whether I agree with him or not, and whether, I said before already, I think he contributed to the block size debate getting as bad as it was and activated a lot of people's rage against Bitcoin. Like a lot of the people that felt like they were being censored by Thamos took it out on coming up with conspiracy theories and doing RBTC and all this stuff. I think he had something to do with that for sure, but it's not like he was secretive about it. So that's just another weird propaganda type of tactic he's using.
Free and open discussion on this forum help individuals in the Bitcoin community achieve truth. Everyone has some wisdom or knowledge to contribute to a discussion, and everyone who reads the discussion and gains that knowledge gets closer to the truth. This is much more effective than having truth dictated by a handful of moderators or voted on by an electorate. So what could have happened since 2013 that made you change your mind? Blockstream CEO later admitted that Thamos was censoring the subreddit too. However, they claimed that the reason justified this was because there was vote manipulation going on. They later released a study for proof of this situation, but I find it incredibly convenient that the person who conducted this vote manipulation study was one of the people participating in censorship. Furthermore, I also looked through the study, and the sample data they used was 6 months after this event took place. And I'm highly skeptical because Reddit makes it incredibly hard to track any upvote metrics on their site. Most of the people being downvoted in this data set were the people that were censoring the community and were rightfully hated. It's funny that Bashko would even post this study because even he admitted that the situation escalated to censorship months before. Now, how do we know that Thamos has involvement with Blockstream? Well, in 2011, Thamos mentioned that if people wanted to donate, he would add improvements to the forum. This was the amount of Bitcoin received to his address. Now, after 2 years went by and nothing happened, some people started to ask what was going on. Thamos then mentioned, Thamos mentioned that if people wanted to donate, he would add improvements to the forum. This was the amount of Bitcoin.
That's a lot of Bitcoin. 56 transactions, 2011 though. I mean, 26,000 Bitcoin. Imagine he kept all that. Wow. 26,000 Bitcoin now is what? Let's see. 26,000. What are we at? 8,500 or something? $221 million. He got donated $221 million to help improve the forum. That's insane. But that's 2011. That was when Bitcoin was like $5. So that was, or even if it was early 2011, that was even less money. Let's see, when was this? 2011. It was probably $26,000, which is still a lot of money. But yeah, I didn't know that he got that donation
And received to his address. Now, after 2 years went by and nothing happened, some people started to ask what was going on. Thamos then mentioned that he planned on creating a new forum software, and instead of, getting help from a community of open source developers, he ended up hiring a no-name studio by the name of Slickage for $100K a month. And tell me, how does a no-name studio land a client for $100K a month when they operated out of this rundown apartment? Inside the
have you ever heard of people working from home, Mr. Barely Sociable? If you're barely sociable, you probably don't work in a big office. A lot of open source developers work from home, and who cares what the registered address looks like? This is another weird thing that he's doing. Like, why wouldn't he get help from open source developers? Well, he probably did. And that's probably a guy working from his home, from his basement, or like 1 or 2 man team or something like that just has a registered office. I mean, let's continue.
Technical documents of Slickage's GitHub, a person by the name of Warren at slickage.com was found.
Okay.
Finding out this
Warren Tagomi is an open source developer. So what the hell? He just said, why wouldn't you get help from open source developers? And then he says, Warren Tagami is the developer. He's an open source developer.
Person just happens to be the same Warren Tagami that works at Blockstream. This means that when this was
Now,
found, he was working at the
not-
same company Deimos hired and Block.
Yeah. Now Warren works at Blockstream. He joined Blockstream, but in 2013 he was just a Bitcoiner, an open source developer. Again, ridiculous. Like in 2013, Blockstream didn't exist. So how are you connecting Blockstream to Deimos? Obviously, the early people that are involved in Bitcoin developed friendships and worked together. Duh.
Blockstream simultaneously. I understand that developers can have multiple jobs, and it doesn't necessarily mean conflict of interest. But when this company was
there we
only
go.
used because Warren Tagami used to help Deimos with the forum, and to top that off, this company reports nowhere close to 100K a month in revenue, yet has continued on Deimos's forum software, and it's 2020, and everyone's still using the old forum. Something isn't adding up here. To be fair, both Warren and Deimos denied any conflict of interest. They claimed that this evidence was being used to push a conspiracy theory that Blockstream had hijacked Bitcoin Core. But when I tell you who Satoshi Nakamoto
Oh my God, this guy, like Warren Tagami, is a really highly accomplished and highly respected Linux developer, as far as I know. Why is he saying all this about Warren? Like Warren is, Warren has a great reputation. If you just Google his name and like Linux, you'll see this guy. This guy has a good pedigree and came from open source and is a Bitcoiner and has good intentions as far as we can see from his career history and his choice to develop on Bitcoin. So this is just a weird thing that he's trying to do. Like, why wouldn't you have one of the, like a Linux developer, an open source developer, Bitcoiner develop your stuff? Why wouldn't you? What's so hard to believe about that? This part of the video is pointless.
is. I think it'll be as clear as day as to what's going on here.
Okay. We got an ad coming up.
$50 into $15,314 in 4 months.
Buy Bitcoin.
Two-
This is not financial
On
advice.
August 15th, 2015, Mike Hearn would write to the Bitcoin mailing list, "Hello, as promised, we have released Bitcoin XT, which includes the bigger blocks patch set. You can get it from here. I feel sad that it's come to this, but there is no other way. The Bitcoin Core project has drifted so far away from the principles myself and many others feel are important that a fork is the only way to fix things.
Fast forward
After
this a
Bitcoin
bit.
XT was launched, it saw a reasonable amount of success.
Or speed
Despite
it up.
one side having full control over discussion, many new nodes were running the software. Meanwhile, on the forums, individuals were calling for Deimos and moderators to
Okay, so this node chart is easy to be spoofed.
After Bitcoin XT was launched, it saw a reasonable amount of success. Despite one side
I mean, that looks like
having full control over discussion,
there's 1,000
many new
nodes, but that could have been just 3 people spinning up nodes on Amazon or something. It doesn't mean that there was 1,000 people running nodes. That just means that there was that many nodes running. And actually, there was a bug in Bitcoin XT that I'm not 100% on this, but I'm pretty sure I remember this from 2017 when the big block sort of like fork was threatening to happen. There was a bug that happened that like shut off the majority of the XT nodes, and somebody I think even traced the traffic to Amazon or to like a Chinese version of like an Amazon web host or something, and proved that the majority of the XT nodes were just spoofed. Like it wasn't individuals running it. It was just somebody was just making it try to appear like there was so much support for Bitcoin XT. And really it was just wasn't people. It was just maybe a group of 5 or 10 people that were just spinning up nodes. So I don't know if this guy's just not aware that you can totally run as many nodes as you want. That doesn't mean that there's that many individual people running those nodes. It just means that somebody paid to have 1,000, or a group of people paid to have 1,000 nodes up at one point. Anyways, let's keep going.
were running the software. Meanwhile, on the forums, individuals were calling for Deimos and moderators to step down. Due to this monopoly over discussion and no compromise being made, this event divided the community to this day, and this event popularized the subreddit by the name of r/BTC. While the subreddit generally caters to Bitcoin Cash, it originated to discuss Bitcoin free from Deimos.
That is just total bullshit. Generally talks about Bitcoin Cash. It's a Bitcoin Cash subreddit. It's total bullshit. So now this is where I start to think this guy does have bad intentions. If anybody with half a brain can go on RBTC and see it's just propaganda, it's BCH propaganda. There's no discussion about Bitcoin on there at all. In fact, these are the people that use this mis-selling, like fraudulent, trying to rebrand Bitcoin Cash as Bitcoin. So they try to confuse new people into thinking that Bitcoin Cash is Bitcoin. And Roger's the head of this thread, this forum, and he owns Bitcoin.com. He doesn't mention any of this. Bitcoin.com is like the number one URL for whenever someone Googles Bitcoin or something like that. It's like the top line domain. And he doesn't talk about that at all. So he talks about, oh, this stuff about Thamos and the censorship, but he doesn't talk about Roger Ver controlling Bitcoin Cash. He doesn't talk about Bitcoin.com. He doesn't talk about how fraudulent and scammy and immoral it is to sell Bitcoin Cash as Bitcoin. So this is a total bias hit piece, really, on Bitcoin, because all he's doing is presenting the negative stuff about the Bitcoin side and not really talking at all about the negative stuff about the Bitcoin Cash side. So hopefully if anybody watching this is new to Bitcoin, you can just see this for yourself. Go to go to Reddit, and go to RBTC and try to post something positive about Bitcoin and just see the response you'll get. Just say, oh, I use Bitcoin today or something like that. And just see the response you'll get. You'll get like downvoted, and you might even get like muted. You'll get people calling you a ridiculous names. And then it's just obvious for anybody that is not biased to see that RBTC is a Bitcoin Cash thread. So, dude, why don't you talk about that? Why are you just only focusing on all the negative stuff about the Bitcoin people? It's not a very balanced video you got here. You got made here.
40 minutes after Mike Hearn had posted about Bitcoin XT, Satoshi would respond. I've been following the recent block size debates through the mailing list. I had hoped the debate would resolve and a fork proposal would achieve a widespread consensus. However, with the formal release of Bitcoin XT, this looks unlikely to happen. And so I'm forced to share my concerns about this very dangerous fork. The developers of this pretender Bitcoin claim to be following my original vision, but nothing could be further from the truth. When I designed Bitcoin, I designed it in such a way as to make further modifications to the consensus rules difficult without near unanimous agreement. Bitcoin was designed to be protected from the influence of charismatic leaders, even if their name is Gavin, Andresen, Barack Obama, or Satoshi Nakamoto. Nearly everyone has to agree on a change, and they have to do it without being forced or pressured into it. By doing a fork in this way, these developers are violating the original vision they claim to honor. They use my old writings to make claims about what Bitcoin was supposed to be. However, I acknowledge that a lot has changed since that time, and new knowledge has been gained that contradicts some of my early opinions. For example, I didn't anticipate pooled mining and its effects on the security of the network. Making Bitcoin a competitive monetary system while also preserving its security properties is not a trivial problem, and we should take more time to come up with a robust solution. I suspect we need a better incentive for users to run nodes instead of relying solely on altruism. If two developers can fork Bitcoin and succeed in redefining what Bitcoin is, in the face of widespread technical criticism and through the use of populist tactics, then I will have no choice but to declare Bitcoin a failed project. Bitcoin was meant to be both technically and socially robust. This present situation has been very disappointing to watch unfold.
So that is awesome. Actually, I didn't know that. I'm I've been in Bitcoin since 2011, and I didn't know that Satoshi came back in 2015 and made that post. I don't know if that's real. Maybe if someone else is in the chat here can tell me, is that legit? Was that proven to be actually Satoshi saying that? Because if it was, it kind of makes a lot of sense as a Bitcoiner. Like, he's basically saying, so if somebody's watching this and they're new to Bitcoin and they're like, well, what the hell did he just say? And why is that important? Basically saying that, like, I said this kind of earlier already, but Nakamoto consensus is a way to try to have a real free market decision-making process based only on incentives, and dishonest people can actually take over Bitcoin. So as long as, looks like there's no cryptographic signature on that post, meaning that like the PGP key is not used. So it's not 100% known if that's actually Satoshi or not. But anyways, if it is him, it would mean that like Bitcoin is not something that is perfectly safe from being destroyed or taken over. That's why it's so special and so important. And so there is no central point of authority. There's no central figure that the government can arrest. There's no company the government can shut down. There's no one miner or two or three or four or five miners the government can go to and raid and like take over. It's not easy for governments or bad actors to all of a sudden spin up mining and like take over the hash power because it's so big now. But also the development of Bitcoin in terms of like who controls the development of Bitcoin, it's supposed to be decentralized as well. And there's supposed to be a lot of people making decisions, and the users, as long as we can keep it small and decentralized and so the users can run their own nodes. That's why he says, you know, if this is really Satoshi saying that, let me make this bigger, saying that instead of relying on altruism, maybe there should be some other incentive to run a node, because he's meaning that like it is important to run a node, otherwise we're not protected from governments and like bad actors. So he's basically saying there that if Bitcoin can be taken over by somebody that's like a personality cult behind them can take Bitcoin over, then Bitcoin failed, because the core of Bitcoin is the ability for honest people to act in their own self-interest for the good of the entire network, and to all have one motivation to make Bitcoin succeed. And yes, if dishonest people take over the network, then it can destroy Bitcoin. So whether that's dishonest miners or dishonest developers or whatever, if it can be taken over, then it's not Bitcoin. Well, I mean, if it's forked, if it's taken over by like a hostile, what did he call it? A strong man or something in this thing? He said personalities or something like that. Where are we at here? Charismatic leaders. So if it can be taken over by charismatic leaders, then upgraded to, you know, against consensus, basically saying that if like the hard fork happens, then that's not Bitcoin anymore. So he's going to declare it a failed project. But there will be a subset of users that will just continue with the real Bitcoin and continue on with it. But it's not, you know, it's difficult. And that's, but luckily it proved during the fork of 2017 that Bitcoin succeeded, the users won. And that was the first really big challenge from within to see if Bitcoin could survive dishonest and unaligned people that have power within the system taking over. And so it looks like Zintoshi here said that Greg, who's Greg Maxwell, one of the core developers, who actually was with Blockstream and left shortly after the fork because for whatever reason he felt like, you know, he's a big privacy guy. But he left Blockstream shortly after the fork, where BCH and all the big blockers left. He still works on Bitcoin, but he left Blockstream. And he said, take the words at face value. Nobody can prove that was Satoshi. But I mean, yeah, so as a Bitcoiner, this is like candy to me. I'm drawn into everything he says there because it sounds great. I agree with all that. But maybe it wasn't Satoshi. So take it with a grain of salt because it may not have been Satoshi. So let's keep watching.
Satoshi Nakamoto. Soon after, many threads started to pop up that someone was attacking Bitcoin XT nodes. Kicking them offline made them unable to vote. Bitcoin XT was supposed to reach consensus by January 1st, 2016. And between the span of August to December, 2 separate conferences were held by the name of Scaling Bitcoin.
Oh man, he doesn't even talk about the, so he talks about the spamming of the XT nodes, but he doesn't talk about the spamming of transactions by the big blockers. So he talks about, this is another big, huge piece he missed. He talks about how Blockstream is incentivized to keep the blocks small, but he doesn't talk about how Roger Ver and Gavin and Jihan Wu and the miners are all incentivized to increase the block size. And he doesn't talk about how even Coinbase was incentivized to increase the block size. He doesn't mention that at all. He only focuses on the negative side of the Blockstream. So let me tell you this side of it. The miners and Roger Ver and Coinbase and some of the biggest companies were incentivized to increase the size of the blocks. And if you look at a transaction graph, I don't have one handy here, but if you look at a transaction graph from this time period he's talking about, you can see that there was a spamming happening to increase the fees on Bitcoin. There was like all the small, so Bitcoin works kind of like a suitcase, right? Like the blocks are kind of like a suitcase, and as the suitcase fills up, it gets more expensive to stuff more things inside. So all the things at the bottom of the suitcase were pretty easy to get into, so they're cheap. And then as the suitcase is full and you want to stuff a shoe in there, you're going to have to like work hard to stuff that shoe in there. So it's going to be pretty expensive. So basically every block was being stuffed with socks and like useless small Satoshi per byte transactions, basically. And this was likely because there was an incentive for Coinbase and Roger Ver and Jihan Wu, like the big miners, the big companies, and these egotists on the big block side to say, look, Bitcoin is too expensive now. Look, Bitcoin is failing. Look, we need to increase the block size. So they had an incentive to stuff the blocks full of these cheap transactions, and then the real usage above that was what would drive the fees up. And the miners were incentivized to keep this going because they would get more fees. So, and because the big miners are actually mining these blocks, it doesn't actually cost them that much because they're mining the blocks. So they were stuffing, most likely. Now I'm saying this as like possibly this happened, but it was very suspicious that the blocks were getting stuffed full of low fee transactions when there wasn't as much demand at the time. And while, maybe one side was probably spamming the XT nodes and like trying to shut them off or like show vulnerabilities in the XT nodes and show why they weren't secure. And the other side was spamming the Bitcoin blockchain with all these super low useless transactions so that they could make it look like Bitcoin was filling up, and they could say, look, we have to increase the block size because X, Y, and Z. And the X, Y, and Z is really, it's getting too expensive, and it's getting too expensive, and more so from their narrative perspective that, look, Bitcoin is going to be broken if we don't do something about it. We have to increase the block size. And it was very cheap to spam the blocks, so they would just do it. Likely, that's what happened. I don't have 100% proof on this, but that's what was happening. The blocks were filling up unnaturally at this point, and it was being used as a narrative for Roger Ver and all the big blockers. They were using it consistently, saying, look at the fees, look at the blocks. But yet it was all these useless small value transactions taking up the bottom of the suitcase, like taking up the most of the space. And then it was the real legitimate actual transactions would have to pay fees. And the miners would benefit from that. Roger Ver benefits from that because he gets to influence his control and power over Bitcoin. And Coinbase would benefit from that because Coinbase was against Bitcoin Core, and they were against this keeping the block small because they would have had to invest engineering resources into doing optimization of their code, and it would have been just so much easier for them to increase the size of Bitcoin blocks. That way they could have had more people onboarding and cheap fees for their users, and all that would have been great for them. But it would have been bad for decentralization, bad long-term for the users. So anyways, another totally biased side of this video where the dude doesn't even mention that there may have been some immoral sort of like cheap shots happening there where somebody on the small block side was like spamming the Bitcoin XT or trying to like shut off the nodes or shut, figure out if there was like a flaw in the node code or something like that and crash them. But then that was also happening by those guys to Bitcoin as well. And they don't even talk about that.
Bitcoin. I want to point out that 2015 was the only year that they held two of these. Bitcoin XT failed to reach a 75% consensus, and on January 28th, 2016, the patch was reverted. I personally believe it to be very apparent that Bitcoin...
Oh, well, there you go. Look at that. Look at that.
In my opinion, this is a community power struggle. Bitcoin XT failed to reach a 75%.
Look at this. So obviously, by that chart, there wasn't like, if you look at like the middle of the chart, that's probably more realistic to actually how many people were running XT nodes. It's probably just Roger and a group of his friends and Gavin and maybe a couple other guys. I mean, maybe, some of the miners or whatever. Maybe there's a group of like 50 people running nodes, because when Bitcoin XT didn't give up after Gavin said this, after they declared that they weren't going to continue. They continued the project up until recently, actually. And then they eventually, I'm pretty sure, gave up on the project because of the big blockers and their egos and their changing Bitcoin, that they finally saw that it was pointless and it wasn't actually decentralized, and they gave up. But look, as you can see, it continues on well into like 2018, even 2019. Bitcoin XT was still being developed, but it was just a competing node implementation of Bitcoin Cash. It was no longer Bitcoin. So that's when you see that big, huge cliff drop off. That's pretty much, what's that, 2016? So that's when they pretty much said, like, we're not going to, whatever. They withdrew their fork proposal, and all the fake nodes got turned off because there was not 1,000 people running these nodes. And then the team continued to work on it and just work on it as a Bitcoin Cash project into 2019. So when you look at this chart, it's likely the end of this is the legitimate, like the middle to the end is probably the legitimate amount of users who had XT nodes running. And it was just a way to try to signal that these were people running nodes instead of just a handful of companies trying to use marketing and like growth hack techniques to make it look like it was popular when it really wasn't popular.
Consensus, and on January 28th, 2016, the patch was reverted. I personally believe it to be very apparent that Bitcoin Core didn't play by the rules. In my opinion, this was a community power struggle. Anyone who supported Bitcoin XT was ousted from Bitcoin Core. Coinbase, for example, supported Bitcoin XT and then had themselves deleted off the Bitcoin.org website. I believe that everyone knows who Satoshi is at Bitcoin Core, and the reason you're probably not seeing anyone speak out is because of something called a non-disclosure agreement.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so firstly, I've already talked about Coinbase and how Coinbase never even hired a Bitcoin developer. Coinbase has just been a leech on Bitcoin. Yes, Coinbase has provided a service to make it like before Coinbase, we had Mt. Gox, which was just like a shit show, like totally amateurish, buggy website that was the biggest exchange. And it made Bitcoin look like not ready for prime time. Coinbase was like a well-funded Silicon Valley VC style exchange that did have the proper ability to scale up and onboard millions of users to their exchange. But what they did was, like, just like Bitcoin.com, they milked the Bitcoin search engine terms, like buy Bitcoin it's probably worth millions of dollars a month for these companies, the search engine optimization of the Bitcoin terms, like buy Bitcoin. And these companies like Coinbase and Bitcoin.com and blockchain.info, they did like search engine optimization pretty early on, and they just got all that free traffic. And what did they do with that? Did they become good stewards of the Bitcoin blockchain? No, they were egotistical. And when they didn't get their way, they went against Bitcoin. They forked coins. They made their own coins. They started promoting shit coins to all the users of new users. So if you're a new user of Bitcoin watching this and you got your first Bitcoin from Coinbase, I 100% guarantee you've been pitched a shit coin by Coinbase. Well, that's what they do. They try to get you gambling. So Coinbase milked millions of people searching Bitcoin on Google and on the app stores, got all that free juicy users, grew their company up to $1 billion unicorn valuation off the back of Bitcoin. And because they didn't get their way with Bitcoin XT and increasing the block size, Brian, what the hell is his name? I can't remember his last name right now. He hadn't even tweeted the word Bitcoin in like 2 years because he was so butthurt by the whole thing. So what did he do? He supported Ethereum. He supported Ripple, and he supported, well, maybe not Ripple, but all these other altcoins, and they created Coinbase Ventures and started investing in ICOs and launching ZRX and all these gambling tokens, basically these Forex tokens and penny stock tokens. Pretty much like what Coinbase did was they were butthurt by this big block thing not succeeding, so they kind of abandoned Bitcoin, but they kept milking the term buy Bitcoin. Bitcoin.com did the same thing. They started supporting BCH, and they started trying to convince noobs that were searching buy Bitcoin that BCH was Bitcoin. Blockchain.info added Bitcoin before they added the scaling technology that would have helped scale up the Bitcoin network, which was what this whole thing was about in the first place. We decided to go with SegWit instead of XT, instead of increasing the block size, and Lightning Network and side chains. And Coinbase just only recently added batching transactions. So there's been lots of things that Coinbase could have done, but they didn't do it because they were more concerned about being in control of Bitcoin development. They thought that because they're the Silicon Valley VC-backed software guru, billionaire, unicorn valuation companies, and they've done this with Facebook and Google and all this, that they can take over Bitcoin too. And because they had the support of the biggest Chinese miners, they thought they could do it. But you know what they didn't have the support of? The developers and the users of Bitcoin. So this is the first real like technology and money system that even the Bitcoiners can't change it. So these guys were Bitcoin businesses and Bitcoin miners, but they were corporations and they cared more about profits than they cared about, you know, and DevOps costs and all that, than they cared about Bitcoin. And it was proven because what did they do when they didn't get their way? They didn't conform to Bitcoin. They started promoting shitcoins, and they actually went against Bitcoin. Hamilton says Coinbase scaled Bitcoin as well as themselves, but yeah, they went corrupt pretty quick. I mean, yeah, they scaled really well, but they also went against Bitcoin. So I know for people that are kind of new, they're probably wondering like, well, how are they against Bitcoin? Like they're the #1 Bitcoin exchange. Well, if you look at the difference between Coinbase and Square, you'll see that like there's a philosophical purity there with Jack Dorsey. He believes that Bitcoin is like the currency of the internet. And if you look at Blockstream versus, you know, the Ethereum Foundation or something like that, it's a bunch of cypherpunks versus like on the Blockstream side that are motivated to make the value of Bitcoin go up versus a bunch of like coder, founder, marketing people, entrepreneurs and stuff that are just trying to do like Silicon Valley style, like they're mixing like Bitcoin and Silicon Valley VC style investing, and not real, you know, every project on Ethereum has its own token. So it's just pretty much created this big cesspool of tokens that are more like penny stocks and Forex currencies than it is about like a mission to have decentralized, censorship resistant money that's actually fully decentralized, or as close as possible to decentralized as we can get. But that's what Bitcoin is. And just because, and now we're going to get into this little non-disclosure agreement thing here. This is just reaching. He's just reaching here. He's just because there's a non-disclosure agreement does not mean that they know who Satoshi is and they can't say, like, who cares about non-disclosure agreements? If you own Bitcoin and you know who Satoshi is and you have a non-disclosure agreement with your company and you want to say who Satoshi is and Bitcoin goes up to 20 grand, you're going to say who Satoshi is because you don't care about your company anymore. You don't need to work anymore. If you're a developer that had, like Thamos earlier in this video, 26,000 Bitcoin donated to him in 2011, and he knows, you know, or Warren or something like that, like any of these Blockstream guys knew who Satoshi was. I mean, Greg Maxwell left Blockstream. These guys, a lot of these guys leave Blockstream because they don't need money anymore. Like they're set. So just because there's a non-disclosure agreement, it doesn't mean that you're going to lose your Bitcoin. So, you know, maybe they would be abiding by this non-disclosure agreement while they're working at Blockstream and Blockstream is paying their bills. But after you get a financial windfall from Bitcoin going up to 20K, you're not going to really give two shits about your Blockstream non-disclosure agreement anymore. You got Bitcoin. So this is just bad logic. Somebody said here, Vistomail would relay any message at the time. 2015 message could have been easily spoofed. I got you. So the earlier comment was probably just like a Bitcoiner or a troll or something, just commenting on the block war, finding some kind of exploit or loophole with Vistomail at the time. Thanks for pointing that out.
Agreement. So when Gavin came out publicly and said this,
I do think Craig is Satoshi. I met with him in London. He fits the kind of person that I was interacting with way back in 2010. And he provided some cryptographic proof using the private key from the very first Bitcoin block to show that he possessed that key. So although it's impossible to prove something like that 100%, I think for me, he's proved it beyond a reasonable doubt.
Gavin later mentioned that there was a chance he could have been bamboozled by Craig Wright, but I personally think he never thought that Craig Wright was Satoshi, and he was in on it. Craig Wright has been someone who is known to have wanted to have a larger block size. It makes sense that Gavin named someone else as Satoshi because he wanted to win community support over the block size. If Bitcoin Core didn't know who Satoshi Nakamoto was, then why would they revoke Gavin's commit access as soon as he named Craig Wright as Satoshi?
Oh man, like this is just kind of ridiculous. Like it was obvious at the time that Craig Wright was not Satoshi. A bunch of world-leading cryptographers proved that Craig Wright faked the cryptographic proof. He tricked Gavin into thinking that he had signed the block, but other people showed that the block was like a pre-compiled signature that anybody could have fooled someone who didn't know that this pre-compiled signature existed, could be fooled into thinking that this was actually a signing of a transaction. But it was debunked by not only Bitcoiners, but by cryptographers. And, you know, the Craig Wright just totally flipped his lid when the cryptographer was trying to push him on showing like actual proof instead of just like simulated proof. And basically Gavin was fooled. And yeah, look, we got here, Gavin was fooled. And the you know, Bitcoiners thought Gavin was either an idiot or hacked. So he had already not been contributing anymore to Bitcoin Core. He had already proven that he wanted to be the benevolent dictator of Bitcoin. He wanted to wrestle control of Bitcoin. He was working on Bitcoin XT and trying to compete, like make an altcoin. And then all of a sudden he's, you know, and he was already previously like talking to the feds and was one of the reasons why Satoshi left Bitcoin in the first place. So like there's a lot of backstory there. It's for him to just go and say that I think it's because he was in on it. No, it's probably like the more obvious reason that he was tricked, and it came out that, you know, his reputation was ruined because he said that this fake Satoshi guy was Satoshi. Why can't that be it? So this dude's just using such weak logic here. It's more likely that he was tricked and fooled, or that he was hacked at the time. That's what the developers thought. And he was already not developing on Bitcoin for a long time, so they revoked his access. He turned against Bitcoin, basically, by saying that Craig Wright was Satoshi, and he was using it as like a reputation thing. He was like doing interviews, and Craig Wright was going on you know, Newsweek or whatever it was, and doing all this press. And the people that had kind of known about Craig Wright already knew that Craig was working on this suite of patents with Calvin Ayre, who was financing the project. It was EITC Holdings before it was Enchain, and Craig Wright was trying to pretend to be Satoshi so that he could sell this suite of patents that he had made to Google or some big company so that EITC Holdings could have a mega cash out day. And then when it came out and it got proven that he wasn't Satoshi, that kind of fell apart and they started Enchain. And they, you know, Calvin Ayre is this kind of like poker magnate guy from some tax haven in the Caribbean, and thinks that BCH was Bitcoin. And like, so anyways, it was just all a ploy. Satoshi wouldn't have made this big suite of patents and tried to sell the patents to Google or some big company. That's the antithesis of Bitcoin. Like, and he doesn't talk about the ridiculousness of the bonded courier and the lawsuit, and how Andresen Antonopoulos just recently proved that there was no way that this bonded courier story and the Tulip Trust could be real. So he doesn't go into much of this at all, except for this wild, like, logical leap and accusation that he thinks that Gavin was in on it and he knew that he wasn't Satoshi, but he was just saying it so he could get support for XT. That's BS. He thought he was tricked. What's wrong with that? Why can't you just say he was tricked and he's not as smart as you think it is? He was. Yeah, MZ said another thing here was that, you know, Gavin was given a book and was a computer, like a laptop, and was told it was brand new, but it was like Craig Wright's assistant that got, oh yeah, this is a new laptop. It wasn't like proven that it was new. And when the cryptographer that was there tried to push him on it, Craig Wright stormed off and like started swearing and did the Craig Wright thing where he just freaks out and swears and talks about how brilliant he is and then just shuts everything down because he's a fake. He got punked. Yeah, man. Why can't you just admit why does it have to be all this big, easy to fit thing into your narrative? Why can't it just be that Gavin was punked? Because I think he was punked, and that's the more likely story. That Craig Wright is a scammer. He was trying to get rich, him and Calvin Ayre, and he was using this as a marketing ploy and press for his suite of patents, and he was trying to take over. He was also in trouble with the Australian tax authorities, and he was caught changing words on his blog and like faking documents, forging documents. He was caught giving one of Roger Ver's addresses as evidence that it was his address, and later that was like taken off the report because Roger asked him to take it off. This is before they got a big spiff. But Gavin had Gavin most likely got conned. Okay, so that's what it was. Gavin got conned by another fake Satoshi, and that lost his reputation within Bitcoin. His reputation is still destroyed because of that. So let that be a lesson for all these people that think they're Satoshi and like think they can get their minute in the spotlight. You're actually just going to have your reputation ruined, because Bitcoiners are pretty smart. I mean, they can suss out the truth pretty easily in something. So let's just keep going, because that's ridiculous.
Held revoking his commit access despite knowing he wasn't hacked. It's almost like they didn't want to see any evidence because they already know who he is.
Or it's almost that Gavin lost his reputation and was conned and started telling the world that this con artist was Satoshi and that they didn't want him associated with Bitcoin anymore because we didn't. There was actually a point where I was thinking that he was Satoshi because I respected Gavin back then. And when Gavin said that Craig Wright was Satoshi, I was like, oh my God, we found Satoshi. And I was so into the story. And then it wasn't that until I started researching into EITC holdings and started seeing all these patents, and their plan was to sell the patents, and that he's working with Calvin Ayre of Bodog, who was this like fugitive from the US authorities because of his poker site and all this stuff. I'm like, this does not seem like something a Satoshi would do. So, it's more likely that the Bitcoiners and the cryptographers discovered this guy's a fraud, and that Gavin was not with Bitcoin anymore, really in alignment. And he was just working personally to increase his reputation and do consulting and like to actually work against Bitcoin by supporting this big block altcoins. Why can't it be that? That's probably what it is. Not that your weird conspiracy over, oh, they're under NDA and they already know who Satoshi is and they can't say, so they removed Gavin. No, that's bad logic. Good story, though.
Before I cut to the chase,
nice
there's one
conspiracy
Reddit comment I
story.
wanna read from Gavin. In this thread sharing an article about how Craig may have tricked Gavin, someone insinuated that Gavin might know a little bit more about the situation than he leads on. Gavin replied, I won't violate people's privacy or repeat things told to me under non-disclosure agreements, so I'm stuck. I'm not going to say anything.
Okay, so the whole thing was the non-disclosure agreement was with Blockstream, and now Gavin was under a non-disclosure agreement. Gavin was never a Blockstream employee, as far as I know, so that's just you're linking two things together that just don't link. Anybody can say anything. I can say I'm under a non-disclosure agreement, so I can't say who Satoshi is. I know who Satoshi is. I'm just not going to say it because I'm under non-disclosure. He's trying to save face here. All right. Let's keep going.
More, except I suspect someday the full story will come out and it'll be made into a movie. I'm convinced this message is 100% real, and I think you will too when I tell you who Satoshi is, but I completely understand everyone's skepticism with all the things going on in the community at the time. The email originates from the original Visto mail servers and was not spoofed in any way. The domain owner hadn't changed since 2007. This email was never compromised. Now let's take a look at the writing style. Notice the double space after a period, and Satoshi writes in British English. Notice the spelling of honor. I know there's still some room for doubt here, but that's kind of the point. I'm certain he could have proved his identity, but the goal of this message was to influence people. Once Bitcoin XT failed, there was no longer a reason
double
to follow
spaces.
up. Our final clue is that Satoshi Nakamoto is against a larger block size in the present day, and it's time for me to reveal who he is. When it comes to this or any topic, I have to say the simplest answer is likely correct, and it's no surprise that one candidate literally matches every single detail to Satoshi Nakamoto. Despite how many people will tell you that Satoshi Nakamoto is a collective or Satoshi Nakamoto was made by the government, there's not really any evidence to suggest that. If you recall from part 2, I stated that Satoshi was either trying to throw us off the trail at every given opportunity, or the clue should be taken at face value. As it turns out, he didn't go to that great of lengths to hide his identity. The first clues that we should take a look at are which technical documents were used to create Satoshi's white paper. There are only 2 core ideas that were infused into the creation of Bitcoin. Sure, you had a lot of applied cryptography and other aspects of the project, but the main 1,000-foot inspiration was the B-Money proposal, as it outlined all of the ideas for a digital ledger that we see in the blockchain. And the second component was the proof-of-work system, also known as Hashcash. This is used in the Bitcoin mining function and is used to verify all of our transactions.
I love
The person who
this.
invented Hashcash was Adam Back, Blockstream CEO. And throughout this video, you may have noticed I put some importance on Blockstream's attachment to a lot of the things that were going on in 2015. So let's take a look at Mr. Adam Back. Adam Back is referenced in Satoshi Nakamoto's very first email. This email was sent to Wei Dai, and in this message, Satoshi was reaching out because he wanted to get the date of publication for Wei Dai's B-Money. The email reads, "I was very interested to read your B-Money page. I'm getting ready to release a paper that expands on your ideas into a complete working system." Adam Back at hashcash.org noticed the similarities and pointed me to your site. This email implies another message was sent to Adam Back, but what's interesting here is that Satoshi supposedly corresponded with him, but there's no evidence to ever suggest that.
Wait,
we
what?
have corresponded. Noticed the similarities
Kinda
and pointed me
lost.
to your site. This email implies another message was sent to Adam Back, but was very interested to read your B-Money page. I'm getting ready to release a paper that expands on your ideas
What's he saying? That how does it imply Adam Back?
into a complete working system. Adam Back at hashcash.org noticed
Adam Back. Oh, I see. Adam Back noticed the similarities. Okay, I got you. And pointing me to your site. Oh, okay. So I didn't know that actually. I didn't know that. I didn't know that this existed. I mean, I knew that Adam Back's Hashcash was referenced in the Bitcoin white paper, and that like Hashcash was one of the main technologies and ideas that was used to create Bitcoin. But I didn't know that there was this message from Satoshi to Wei Dai referencing Adam Back. That's news to me, so that's interesting.
the similarities and pointed me to your site. This email implies another message was sent to Adam Back, but what's interesting here is that Satoshi supposedly corresponded with him, but there's no evidence to ever suggest that. We have correspondence
Ooh.
between Satoshi and basically everyone else except for Adam Back.
Oh, I like that.
When Adam has been asked about it, he'll always virtue
now
signal
I'm
and say
into
that
it.
he would delete or shred any evidence. That's interesting that you want to protect Satoshi in this case, but when someone who obviously isn't Satoshi like Paul LaRue makes a headline, you'll spread obvious misinformation. That's incredibly convenient.
Wait, what?
Asked
Misinformation.
about it, he'll always virtue signal. And
Okay, so he's saying that Adam said that there's no evidence in the public record of Satoshi's communications with Adam, because Adam apparently said that he would shred the evidence or delete out of respect. And Adam has been known to be a cypherpunk and respect privacy and all that stuff, so that's probably true. I've never revealed my emails, and maybe I never will. Etiquette dictates not sharing emails without permission. And since Satoshi disappeared, he doesn't have permission, so that makes sense, I guess.
and say that he would delete or shred any evidence. That's interesting that you want to protect Satoshi in this case, but when someone who obviously isn't Satoshi like Paul LaRue makes a headline, you'll spread.
So this is what doesn't make any sense. Yeah, obviously, if somebody comes out that Adam thinks is just trying to sell a book or sell some patents or like get some funding for a company or scam somebody out of money or get to 15 minutes of fame. Yeah, if Adam can tell that person's not Satoshi, he's going to tweet out or something to discredit that person, just like every single other Bitcoiner. Like, have you ever been on Bitcoin Twitter when there's a new Satoshi? This is nothing special. It's not like Adam's the only one that like tweets how ridiculous these people are. Pretty much every Bitcoiner on Bitcoin Twitter, even a bunch of altcoin guys and like founders of ICO coins and all these other crypto people, they usually all like will say like this is bullshit and like give their reasons why they think this new fake Toshi is not a real Satoshi candidate. So again, like the logic is kind of weak. Like it's not like a unique circumstance that Adam won't reveal the Satoshi emails, but then he will call out obvious fake Satoshis. Who wouldn't do that? If you're gonna say that you want to respect etiquette, that's consistent logic to me.
Obvious misinformation. That's incredibly convenient because after going down this rabbit hole,
Why does he say
and
misinformation?
say that he would delete or shred any evidence.
where's the
That's interesting that you want to
misinformation?
protect Satoshi in this case, but when someone who obviously isn't Satoshi like Paul LaRue makes a headline,
Another speculative Satoshi candidate. Research inconclusive. But Breaking Bad former programmer E4M TrueCrypt precursor. That's like a software that encrypts files or hard drives. Turned international crime kingpin Paul Leroux, currently in custody and reportedly collaborating with the DEA. At least he can code and wrote crypto code. So how's this disinformation? That's not disinformation. Like, that was news. So why is he using the word disinformation? Adam didn't post any disinformation there. I remember when this story came out, actually. That's bullshit. This guy's he's just trying to use dramatic words, and anyway, that's not disinformation.
You'll spread obvious misinformation. That's incredibly convenient, because after going down this rabbit hole, I'm convinced that emails never existed in the first place. The day that B-Money was announced, it didn't get any attention. There's only about 9 discussion threads on the cryptography mailing list about this B-Money proposal, and 2 of them are about the link being broken. This paper was so obscure that the person who actually wrote about it was Adam Back. Don't get it twisted. Wade I definitely wrote the paper, but Adam Back copied the paper onto the cryptography mailing list and asked for feedback. In the next email in this thread, it basically outlines the entire thing. B-Money seems to be...
Yeah, there was the cypherpunks mailing list that he was a part of, and you know, Julian Assange was a part of it too, I think, and I'm pretty sure that even Craig Wright had, unfortunately, had some interactions on the mailing list with guys like Julian Assange and Adam. I don't know if it was Adam, but I mean, there was a lot of people into encryption and decentralized technology and privacy that were on the mailing list. So if you're interested in that and you were public about it, then it doesn't make any, it's not a surprise that you would have posted about this. If you saw this, you would post about it. So, okay, let's see what he's trying to say here.
A book entry eCash system related to Hashcash, the book open and distributed. Anonymity is derived from the fact that participants can be pseudonymous. Hashcash would be a good candidate function for Wade's decentralized minting idea. To create value, you burn CPU time, just like Hashcash, but Wade's distributed open book entry system allows you to pseudonymously exchange value. So here we directly see that Adam just said that B-Money would be a candidate for Hashcash and even mentions that pseudonyms would be a great way to get money out anonymously. I looked through all the discussion on B-Money on the various mailing lists, and most people didn't even like the idea. Now, if you're wondering whether Adam Back could have pulled it off, I would say 100% yes. He's the perfect candidate.
I'd say so too. He probably could.
Computing systems, which would be the perfect background for building a decentralized computer network. Bitcoin was coded in C++, and Adam codes proficiently in C++.
Ooh,
something we need to consider.
One of the most popular programming languages on the internet. What a smoking gun! Oh, and he uses 2 spaces. Must be Satoshi. Okay, let's keep going.
Is an inventor. He created a new piece of technology, and this guy was filing multiple patents a year up until.
Oh, really? Adam was? Oh yeah, look at that. Who else was on those?
Until April of 2005, and then he just
Okay.
disappears until March 2010, which is a full year after Bitcoin was released. I looked through all of the mailing lists that his email was associated to, and he goes dormant from 2007 until 2010. He was also not writing any academic papers during this time. According to Adam Back, Satoshi supposedly even sent him the software once it was released, but according to him, he shrugged it off and didn't mine a single Bitcoin.
What's up, Crypto Scam Hub? I think you've renamed your Bitcoin meme hub, right? That's what you've renamed your Twitter account to. But yeah, Zuko Wilcox was his last Zuko. I can't remember. I think that's his last name. He was on the Cypherpunks mailing list, and Zuko and Hal Finney, or worked for Hal Finney, I'm pretty sure, or maybe Zuko worked with Hal Finney on David Chaum's eCash or whatever the heck David Chaum's project was. Digicash, yeah. So yeah, there's been a lot of people in the crypto space that maybe were more into like entrepreneurship or making money that ended up making their own projects that were on the list. So yeah, there was a lot of people on the list. This is interesting stuff. I gotta say, like, he is kind of convincing me here that Adam Back is Satoshi. Let's keep watching this.
Adam has never provided proof of these emails either. Now I know you're thinking, well, maybe Adam didn't have any interest in anonymous payments anymore. After all, that was back in 1998.
I'm not thinking that. Give me a break.
But here's the thing. Around 2007, right when Satoshi started on Bitcoin's development, if you read Adam Back's Wikipedia page, which he wrote himself, it reads, he has an interest in privacy technology and electronic cash. So you had time to update your Wikipedia information, stating that you're interested in anonymous payment systems right when Satoshi started development on Bitcoin. But when Satoshi finally figured out how to do something that you planned on doing since 1998, you don't even bother to open the software? How convenient. It's not like you were busy during this time. Call me crazy, but if we dive deeper into Adam Back, more coincidences just start lining up. What about Satoshi's writing style? Well, if you recall from part 1, he uses British English, and whenever possible, he's known to use double space after.
Well, listen, just to be clear, I use double spaces and I use British typings because I'm in Canada and all of our keyboards default to British English, like our dictionaries. So, all these British words.
It's not like you were busy during this time. Call me crazy, but if we dive deeper into Adam Back, more coincidences just start lining up. What about Satoshi's writing style? Well, if
checks. That's how I spell it.
Recall from part
I don't spell analyze like that.
1,
Favor, I spell like that.
British
Organize, I don't spell like that. So, well, some Canadians do though. Well, listen, it doesn't mean that because you use British language and British colloquialisms and double spacing after a period that either it doesn't mean that Satoshi was British, or it means it could be a Canadian person, or it could also be that maybe it was another British person, or maybe Satoshi was trying to throw people off his trail or her trail or their trail or however you want to say that. And maybe it was just a strategy. Like Satoshi was a smart person to be able to hide their trail from the world for this long and was very conscious about privacy at the time. Perhaps I am Satoshi. No, it's not. It's not me. Hey, what's up? And you can write your own Wikipedia page here. Yeah, you can. You can write your own Wikipedia page, but it's not likely that you'll get it approved. But if you're not notable, but obviously Adam was interested in writing his own Wikipedia page, I guess, because he was writing patents and he was the developer of Hashcash and he was a cypherpunk and all that stuff. So sure, he could have written his own page. I don't even know if that's what he said. I'm not sure if that's what they were saying, that he wrote his own Wikipedia page. But the one thing too, I will say that if it's Adam Back, the guy did say that he's still against big blocks, just like Satoshi was, but that email that came out from Satoshi, allegedly, we already discussed that email service allowed anybody to like spoof emails, or not spoof the emails. How was it worded? Let me find that. There it was. Vista Mail would relay any message at the time. So the Satoshi 2015 message could have been easily spoofed. So Vista Mail was allowing it to be relayed, which maybe would not get caught as a spoof because of a bug or like maybe a feature of this service, and maybe somebody discovered that and wrote this message, like a pro small block message claiming to be Satoshi. So maybe it wasn't Satoshi, but this guy's saying that he really believes that was Satoshi's message. But Adam Back was not against bigger blocks, and I don't think he still is against bigger blocks. Adam Back was actually pro big blocks in consensus. He was okay with seeing a 2 megabyte, then a 4 megabyte, then an 8 megabyte fork of Bitcoin, an upgrade. So Adam Back was never against big blocks. So that kind of invalidates what this dude's saying, that he's always against big blocks even today. Even today, Adam's not like against big blocks. What Adam's against is forks out of consensus. And I don't know, I'm not going to put words in Adam's mouth, but it seems like the logic has evolved now to think that hard forks in general just probably won't work with Bitcoin, because I think I've heard Adam phrase it that the harder that Bitcoin becomes as a base layer of money and like a scarce asset that has been hardened over these conflict forks and all that, it gives more confidence to investors and to users that Bitcoin will never lose its moneyness and the scarcity and the properties that make it so valuable. So the longer that it goes without a fork, they actually, like, the stronger that meme is of Bitcoin being decentralized, unchangeable, not controlled by anybody. So I don't know if Adam's belief has changed or not, but I do know that Adam was not against the hard fork at the time, or sorry, he was not against the idea of doing a 2, 4, 8 megabyte fork as long as it was done within consensus. Now, obviously, what transpired is that it wasn't done within consensus, and Adam was one of the most vocal people that were saying put your money where your mouth is during the 2017 fork, and he was like tweeting all the time that he's buying the dip and all that stuff. So that's one of the things I liked about Adam, was that he was neutral on it. It seemed like he was pro forks to make a compromise happen, but it wasn't in consensus. So then obviously he chose the side of to not destroy Bitcoin and to keep Bitcoin in consensus. And that's the important part of this, is to be in consensus. So he's wrong to say that Adam was against big blocks and now is against big blocks. I don't think Adam is against big blocks. That's not the read I get from Adam. I don't think he's against big blocks. I just think he's against out of consensus forks of Bitcoin and trying to make big, smaller blocks work in consensus. But maybe someone can tell me if I got that wrong. And Blingting says, we unmasking Satoshi? My boss Marshall does that on Twitter every couple years. So does he post the same person? I mean, there's a lot of early people, early miners and stuff that think they know who Satoshi is. And, like, somebody out there has to know. Satoshi probably has to know, but I don't think it's Adam. I mean, it could be. This guy's got me kind of a little bit thinking about it now, because if there was anybody that would be Satoshi, I would love if it was Adam Back.
English, and whenever possible, he's known to use double space after each period. Adam Back frequently includes double spacing after each sentence in his various writings, and he's British, so British English is also included.
I'm not British, but
remember how Satoshi had a political message inside the Genesis block that references the Times, a UK newspaper? Well, what if I told you Adam Back is known for leaving political messages with compact code, and he grew up in London, where the Times newspaper was distributed.
I mean,
not many people know this, but web design wasn't Satoshi's specialty. He actually received help in creating the forums from a guy named Marty Malmi. But if you take a look at the earliest capture of Bitcoin.org when it was done by Satoshi, it's incredibly minimalistic. And if you take a look at cypherspace.org, Adam Back's website, and look at that earliest capture, it looks incredibly similar to Bitcoin in layout. Satoshi Nakamoto also looked up to Hal Finney.
That's not even a layout. That's just words. It looks incredibly similar. It's just words. Like, let's go back and look at that. There's no layout.
Earliest capture of Bitcoin.org when it was done.
So that's not a layout. That's just words.
By Satoshi, it's incredibly minimalistic. And if you take a look at cypherspace.org, Adam Back's web.
That's not even the same layout. Look, like this has like headers and bold and sections and stuff like that. That's not the same layout. It has, look at this. Look, it has a bullet points.
Capture, it looks incredibly simple.
It's just not designed. I mean, okay, so he's got some surface stuff here that it's definitely not a smoking gun. It's coincidences. Yeah, it's like the layout is plain HTML. So yeah, maybe it's Szabo.
Bitcoin layout. Satoshi Nakamoto also looked up to Hal Finney.
It couldn't have been Nick Szabo though, because Nick Szabo doesn't use double spaces after a period, and he didn't grow up in London. So apparently, what makes you Satoshi Nakamoto is if you know what the Times of London is, and if you use British English. As if Satoshi's not smart enough to throw people off his trail and use fake, like, craft a typing style that could fool the NSA.
Do you know who else?
But not fool this guy. So he's not going to fool barely sociable, but he can fool the NSA.
Looked up to Hal Finney? Adam Back. As I mentioned earlier, there's a large gap in Adam Back's digital footprint, and he reappears on Twitter in 2010.
Ooh,
when he resurfaces, he becomes a resident of Malta. Malta is the location you move to if you're about to receive a large amount of money that you don't want to be taxed heavily on.
That's true.
You remember from part 1 when Satoshi said, I make this appeal to WikiLeaks not to use Bitcoin? If you dig through Adam Back's 19,000 tweets to the very beginning, when he took to Twitter, his first year on the platform was him advocating about the discussion of WikiLeaks.
Oh, that's interesting, actually. Let me see that. What did he say?
Do you remember from part 1 when Satoshi said, I make this appeal to WikiLeaks not to use Bitcoin? If you dig through Adam Back.
So yeah, for people who don't know, if you're new to Bitcoin, yes, in the early days, WikiLeaks had their PayPal and their Visa and everything suspended, and they weren't allowed to. They were basically censored by the banks and the U.S. government, and they wanted to start using Bitcoin, but Satoshi asked them not to because it would draw too much attention, and Julian Assange ended up becoming a big supporter of Bitcoin. But anyways, let's see what Adam said here. Assange said before the reopening, dismissed their. He's just talking about WikiLeaks. He's not talking about Bitcoin and WikiLeaks. Do you guys? This guy.
10,000 tweets to the very beginning when he took to
He talks about WikiLeaks. Where's the thing about
Twitter.
Bitcoin?
His first year on the platform was him
Talking about, yeah, WikiLeaks was a huge deal in 2010. That was when WikiLeaks. That was around when WikiLeaks released the gunboat videos, and like that was one of the biggest things that WikiLeaks ever did, was for like to put out all that information about how the Reuters journalist got gunned down by the U.S. soldiers who were kind of like joking about it like it was a video game, and all the Abu Ghraib stuff, and like that was a big year for WikiLeaks. So anybody that's interested in freedom of information and free speech and censorship and all that is going to be talking about WikiLeaks. Anybody into politics at all is going to be talking about WikiLeaks in 2010. Adam tweeted about that timing as well, that it might seem a coincidence, but yeah, but it's just a coincidence. Anybody into Bitcoin is also into WikiLeaks, pretty much. Like it's like a philosophical sort of sister subject or whatever. Freedom of speech, freedom of the press. Obviously, someone that's into privacy and censorship and free speech and all this stuff is going to be talking about WikiLeaks.
advocating about the discussion of WikiLeaks. In 20
So he's leaping there. He's drawing a leap to say that because he talked about WikiLeaks and because Satoshi talked about WikiLeaks, then he's Satoshi. Okay.
12, he started updating Wikipedia articles about Bitcoin, providing detailed insight into the history of it. But something you should know is that the guy didn't get involved with Bitcoin until April of 2013. Once again, this guy cared enough about Bitcoin's history to update his Wikipedia article.
What?
Updating Wikipedia
Let's
and make
see
this appeal to
again.
WikiLeaks not to use Bitcoin. If you dig through Adam Back's 19,000 tweets to the very beginning when he took to Twitter,
What's he
his first
saying
year on the
here?
platform was him advocating about the discussion of WikiLeaks. In 2012, he
In 2012, October 2012, so near the end of the year in 2012,
started updating Wikipedia articles about Bitcoin, providing
he edited things about proof of work, his own Wikipedia page, Hashcash, the thing he invented. Yeah, so zero knowledge systems, stuff that he's very knowledgeable and interested about. At the end of 2012, 3 years after Bitcoin was invented, Adam has been updating WikiLeaks pages. Wikipedia pages about subjects that he's an expert in. Okay, so that means he's Satoshi? No.
detailed insight into the history of it. But something you should
Yeah, Adam Back was on the Cypherpunks mailing list, and he is an expert in that subject. And sure, why would you not want to update the Wikipedia page on something that you know a lot about if it's wrong? Oh, Austin's here. Hey, what's up, Austin? Austin is the co-founder, the original co-founder of Blockstream. So you got an interest in this takedown piece. No, I'm not doing a takedown. I'm just doing a reaction as a Bitcoiner to this piece, which has got a lot of logical leaps in it. So Austin says that Adam was chief scientist of PL Corp, which sold to EMC, and Adam finished his vesting and came free from. What was PL Corp? I don't know what was EMC, but like that's good to know. Julian Assange, I guess you mean Julian Assange, Asante. But so Adam Austin started Blockstream, so I mean that's kind of interesting. So Austin's there explaining why Adam was not doing anything for those 2 years. And thank you for coming on and saying that, man, because I was starting to think, oh, well, actually, that is interesting that there's a gap in his timeline. So that is like the one thing that this guy said that kind of got me thinking like, oh, wait, maybe he is Satoshi because there was a gap in his timeline. It seemed to fit perfectly. So PL Corp is a distributed software company doing crypto formed with sex. What? Probably a typo. Sorry, typos. Zero knowledge employees. Okay, that makes more sense. So he wasn't doing crypto formed with sex. He was doing crypto formed with X zero knowledge employees. So Somebody else says, why now though? Timing doesn't make sense. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting correlation. There's a bunch of like interesting correlations this guy's making, but because Austin just said that that's the reason why Adam Back was busy, not on, most people weren't on Twitter before 2010. So that's not surprising that Adam would go on Twitter in 2010 as an early adopter of technology. Twitter was like maybe 2009 or 8 or something like that, but most people were coming on Twitter in 10, 11 that were in like early adopters of technologies, because before that it was like Facebook was way more popular than Twitter. And Twitter was kind of looked at as just like a clone of Facebook without the timeline. So let's keep watching this.
Should know is that the guy didn't get involved with Bitcoin until April of 2013. Once again, this.
Okay, so that's 6 months later. So 6 months later, he registered on the Bitcoin Talk forums. I mean, yeah, this is no smoking gun. This is just all coincidences. So let's keep going. Even though I would love Adam Back to be Satoshi, like it would be probably the best Satoshi there could be, I think, is Adam. But let's keep going.
This guy cared enough about Bitcoin's history to update its Wikipedia article, but not enough to mine a single Bitcoin. It's also incredibly interesting that
Listen, that's not just because there's a lot of people that didn't mine a single Bitcoin. Like David Chaum was the creator of DigiCash. David Chaum was way earlier than Adam and these other guys on actually implementing a commercial and like retail version of a digital cash, even though it was like more of a centralized service. David Chaum totally missed Bitcoin. David Chaum was like the father of cryptography, or whatever they call him, the father of like I think it's cryptography, whatever his term is. They, these guys that were early kind of don't, they're got their own ego, they got their own projects. They're like, what's this Bitcoin thing? I don't want to get involved with that. So a lot of early cypherpunks and early people that were into privacy technology and following this sort of esoteric, nerdy digital cash thing didn't jump on Bitcoin right away. So it doesn't just because you were a cypherpunk doesn't mean that you had the foresight to go and like understand Bitcoin right away and start mining them. And it doesn't mean that Adam didn't mine any. Maybe he did, and he just doesn't want people to know. So, and most people that did mine early sold them for like too cheap because they didn't realize it would ever be so successful. So the people that are even getting into Bitcoin now are getting into Bitcoin when it's, what are we at, like $8,000, $9,000, something like that? I mean, that's early. And people now are probably going to sell too early. So in 10 years, if Bitcoin gets to $1 million a Bitcoin and you sold your Bitcoin at $20,000, you're kind of going to be a little bit butthurt, especially if you're the father of cryptography. So you're not going to support Bitcoin. You're going to launch your own coin. You're going to launch your own competing network and try to get rich off of something that you feel entitled to get rich off of, which was something that you were early on, but you just mismanaged the decision. So it doesn't necessarily mean just because you were early that you made the right decisions. Austin says that Julian Assange was old school cypherpunk, who we all dealt with as an old cypherpunk mailing list. Right. So, why didn't he say Julian Assange was Bitcoin? He's got an accent. He knew what the Times of London was. He was early in Bitcoin. So, I mean, yeah, you can, I would love Adam Back to be Satoshi. That would be awesome. That would be sweet. But let's keep watching.
Blockstream, at its entire purpose, is to hire people to further the development of Bitcoin. The guy's received over $100 million in funding, but here's the thing. He's never once committed a single line of code. How would these investors know the guy's qualified to further the development of Bitcoin if he's never touched the thing?
Because of his history, because of his patents, because of his invention of Hashcash, because of his reputation. It's not, you don't have to have committed to the Bitcoin project. I mean, people raise money on a lot less in venture capital. People raise, like in the 2017 crypto bubble, people that had not even coded a day in their lives were raising $100 million for their projects. Just because you raise money doesn't mean that everybody, like a lot of it is FOMO. A lot of the investments are FOMO and reputation and all that. So it doesn't mean anything. This thing that he's saying right now doesn't actually compute.
the world's dumbest investors, or he's Satoshi Nakamoto.
Because otherwise, everybody else on this list would be raising money.
Do you guys want to know the date that Adam Back does finally join the Bitcoin forums and start participating in the community? April 17th, 2013. This is the exact date that an article by the name of The Well-Deserved Fortune of Satoshi Nakamoto came out. He joined back the day everyone figured out how much money Satoshi Nakamoto had. In his introductory post, he starts off bossing people around. He doesn't have a natural progression into the community whatsoever. His first post is telling others to fix certain explanations on the Bitcoin wiki. A few days later, someone ended up making a
Bossing
post about
people
Satoshi Nakamoto's
around.
fortune
Hold on a
forums.
second. Bossing people around.
He starts off bossing.
Okay, I get the kind of like common knowledge narrative he's trying to guide people to, but let's read his post. Is this bossing people around? Digging myself out of the newbie jail, but a real question. Why is difficulty not expressed in bits? With Hashcash, I always used, for example, 20 bits. I think Bitcoin is currently at 52. As a Bitcoin mining is Hashcash mining plus an extension to allow fractional bits. See, I'm reading it in a way that doesn't make it sound bossy at all. Rather than define k 0 bits, define a number less than 2 to the factor of k, where can be fractional. But it's hard to be 100% certain, even if I correctly convert it. This doesn't sound bossy. It's not bossy. He's talking about an interesting technical thing that he's interested in. Doesn't sound bossy. Where's the bossiness? He doesn't even demand anything. He just states something. Look, read through the rest of it. There's no, it's just a statement. He's just talking about something he's an expert in, and he's asking a question, and he doesn't even say anything. So he doesn't appear bossy. Again, it's just like, no, this doesn't work.
People around. He doesn't have a natural progression into the community whatsoever. His first post is telling others to fix certain explanations on the Bitcoin.
What? That's not telling anybody. He's just discussing something. Austin says, also ignores the key investor. We chose Reid Hoffman, who supported Mozilla Corp. Gave us freedom to not be entirely revenue focused while we built stuff. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, wasn't it like Reid Hoffman and Mozilla, like didn't Mozilla start as a free open source project that was like one of the early browsers for the internet and ended up becoming profitable through a licensing deal with Google for like making, so I think it was that Google wanted to be the #1 search provider for Mozilla browser, and it ended up being like $1 billion or $2 billion a year kind of project for Mozilla because they got so much user base for their browser, even though it was a free project. They ended up making a shit ton of money because Google became such a behemoth that Google ended up paying tons of money to browsers. So that makes sense that you would want to have Reid Hoffman as an investor because it's the same sort of thesis there. You're going to continue to build a free project that's open source, and if it gets big enough, there will be some sort of payoff. Austin said nonprofit social benefit play that and for profit sub. We almost set up Blockstream as nonprofit. Crypto Bitcoin meme hub here says Adam's direct response to the video and comments, he explains a lot more. So I unfortunately have my screen share thing set up so I can't change it. It's only screen sharing this video, but yeah, anybody can go on Twitter and look at Adam. He's been tweeting about it. So look at Adam's Twitter. He talks about it. But yeah, a lot of this just, when you take away the like moody song and like the fancy editing and the conspiracy theory like script of this thing, it is interesting. It piques your interest. But when you pause and think logically and actually dissect this, it's nothing more than a bunch of coincidences. And it would be great if Adam Back was Satoshi. I would love that. He'd be the best Satoshi. Just look at that little face. But this does not mean he is Satoshi. Let's keep going.
A few days later, someone ended up linking the post about Satoshi Nakamoto's fortune on the forums, and Adam chimed in saying, well, that's kind of an unfortunate privacy bug. Coincidentally, I thought I fixed a few potential issues like this in Hashcash. For Satoshi now, maybe he can find a private buyer via a lawyer and Swiss banking services. Or perhaps we're forced to implement Zerocoin to protect him. Anyway, don't sweat it, people. He can probably get by on a few million play money and his post-privacy bug fix mining hoard, until there's a solution on his post. When was that bug fixed, by the way? I can't tell from those low-res graphs. And he's probably holding out for the 10K Bitcoin era anyway. Have you ever noticed that we only know about Satoshi's first year of mining? Well, it's incredibly interesting here that Adam Back implies an entirely separate hoard of coins. And the bug fix he's referring to is so incredibly obscure.
He implies a separate hoard. How does he imply a separate hoard? He can probably get by on a few million play money from his post-privacy bug fix mining hoard until there's a solution on his post. I don't know how he's saying that means that there's another stash of coins. But anyways, let's keep going.
How would you know about a mining bug fix that was never included in the changelogs in 2010 when you supposedly got to the forum 2 days ago? And the fact that he mentioned these Swiss banking services that are confidential, that might explain why Blockstream shifted gears.
Okay, there's a concept called lurking. Just because you posted in April 2013 doesn't mean you've been just new to this subject. I don't know why this guy doesn't understand that. Like, lurking is common. Like, people lurk on forums and threads and stuff before they register and start participating. He could have been lurking for 2 years, like while he was working at this other company that Austin was just talking about, PL Corp. Like, he could have been lurking about Bitcoin, and he was, busy and still reading about Bitcoin. And then maybe he stopped working at this company, and then he finally decided he's going to register and start talking about Bitcoin since he's the creator of Hashcash. He was interested in it.
Years to profit off the block size being small. We may never know, because Adam Back, just like Blockstream, never wants to make the financial intentions clear. Later on, Adam Back actually wrote to the author of this article and said, question for the blog author. When was that bug fixed? What proportion of the 130 mil did he spend or cash? That's just curiosity. And I suppose it seems that you're getting too close. You might want to stop in Nakamoto's interest.
Okay. We all think that. Whoa! Piano, dramatic.
What I want to clarify here in this entire video is I'm not saying Satoshi doesn't deserve his wealth or that he doesn't deserve to have control over the project, but what I can see a lot of people having a problem with is when you act like Bitcoin is this community-driven project. Furthermore, acting like Satoshi is living this private life and has to hide from government agencies is a complete virtue signaling lie. And this claim that his privacy needs to remain a secret just because people might come after him for his coins.
We talked about this already.
Other currencies have faces to them, and they.
Okay, we talked about that already, but I guess we have to go over it again. We'll let this go for a minute, though.
Can guard their wealth with no problem. It's like saying every rich person has to hide away from the public. This person gives public talks. This person has a.
So rich people that are rich in fiat money store their fiat money at banks. If somebody wants to rob you, they have to get through the social engineering aspect of going to the bank and getting away with robbing a billionaire and getting the billionaire to somehow transfer the dollars to them, to their bank account. So there's kind of like a built-in security system with fiat money there for a rich person. So that's just one. Just for the first thing there is that somebody that has Bitcoin and is well known to be a multi-billionaire Bitcoiner, it's probably for their best interest to be anonymous. And Bitcoin, the Bitcoin that Satoshi mined has never been touched. And the premise that this guy's coming from is flawed and wrong. And we talked about it at the beginning, but this has been going on for 2.5 hours. So Jesus Christ, I got to stop soon. But to go back to that point, yeah, the previous projects were like eGold and a Liberty Reserve and anything that tried to compete with the US government's monopoly on money ended up having the feds raid it. Other projects, like anything that the government doesn't approve of gets shut down if it's centralized. So Katie Hahn is the kind of like the head of Andresen Horowitz's crypto fund, and she used to be a lawyer for the government, and she admitted in 2013 that the governor or whatever, came to her and said, you got to take down Bitcoin. Like, that was her mission. It was a political mission because of the war on drugs. They wanted to take down Bitcoin in 2013. And she quickly realized that she couldn't take down Bitcoin because it was decentralized. So she went after all the the Bitcoin businesses that were related to anything illegal. So Silk Road, BitInstant, and all that stuff. So it was a big still, and it still was in 2013 a threat to be like a prominent Bitcoiner. And Austin says when Hal Finney was dying, his wife and family were threatened with violence for Bitcoin payments. So yeah, like there's crazy people out there, and because, you know, you should be using multi-sig, you should have your multi-sig devices be stored across different places. If you've got any significant amount of Bitcoin, you shouldn't have it all in your house, you know, on a wallet. You should think about your security and your estate planning and all that stuff. So, you know, like a company like Casa or something like that, where they help you do professional, like secure multi-sig storage where the devices are actually in different locations, is a good option. But for this guy to just say that, oh, well, because Vitalik Buterin is public, or Buterin, sorry, is public, then Satoshi should just come out. Or, you know, because all these altcoin founders are public, then Satoshi should just come out. Well, that logic doesn't follow, because those guys can only be public because of Bitcoin paving the way. So if Bitcoin's founder was public in 2013, you better believe the government would have given him the treatment that they gave Ross Ulbricht and Charlie Shrem and anyone else who was kind of associated with doing illegal activity, because Bitcoin itself was looked at as illegal activity, and the government tried to shut Bitcoin down in 2013, but they were unable to because it's decentralized. Just like how they can't shut down BitTorrent downloading of movies illegally. It's illegal to download movies off BitTorrent, but everybody still does it because they can't stop it, because there's too many people doing it. So this guy's just totally wrong. There is a threat. There was a threat. And maybe now he's right. Maybe now there's not as much of a threat. Like maybe now if Satoshi, the actual Satoshi, came out, maybe it's too big already that he wouldn't, his life or her life or whatever wouldn't be threatened. And by the government, mostly, I mean, like, it's the biggest risk is the government going to go after you. Look what they're doing to Julian Assange. Like, Julian Assange, his life is ruined. Look at Chelsea Manning, life ruined. And all they're doing is exposing criminal things that the government has been doing. They're using free speech. And even the public was turned against Julian Assange because of the manipulation of the public thought that he's colluding with Putin and all this crap. So, you know, in 2010, all the left was like totally pro WikiLeaks, but then now the left is all totally anti WikiLeaks and free speech and freedom of information because Julian Assange has been associated with helping Donald Trump get elected, which is totally not what he did. He just released information just like he always used to do. So the public can be manipulated into thinking anything. And especially now, when there's such a big bent against capitalism and free markets and pro-socialism amongst young people and Democrats and all that, it's easy to construct a narrative that demonizes Bitcoin and that turns Bitcoin into this thing that's just evil. And, you know, if the founder was identified, then, you know, it's not unrealistic for the government to decide to go after the founder of Bitcoin. It's the biggest one. It's got the Lindy effect. Just like how Bitcoin is the most likely one to succeed and all these altcoins are most likely, like, they're most likely going to fail, or they're not going to be as successful as Bitcoin, or, you know, because Bitcoin has got the Lindy effect, Bitcoin has the network effects, Bitcoin is number one, it's probably going to retain number one. It is the most likely that the governments will go after the founder of Bitcoin if it ever comes out who it is, because it's the biggest chunk of Bitcoins that they can set an example of, and the biggest, most successful cryptocurrency that threatens fiat money. They're not going to go after like a Litecoin or something like that, because who cares if they go after Litecoin? Who cares if they go after Ethereum? And another thing is, like Ethereum and Ripple and all these other companies or cryptocurrencies, might as well be companies, all these other altcoins, most of the big ones anyway, they've been lobbying the government, and they've been getting the government on their side, and in a way that actually benefits Bitcoin. So some of these altcoins, because they lobby governments to have pro cryptocurrency laws and stuff like that, in a way helps Bitcoin. But Bitcoin has not really done that because there is no founder of Bitcoin. I mean, there's projects like Coin Center that try to lobby the government for pro privacy, pro Bitcoin, pro cryptocurrency laws and tax treatment and stuff, which is great, but they're not representing Bitcoin. They're just representing Bitcoiners. So this guy's just totally wrong if he thinks that there's no risk of the government going after the founder of Bitcoin if he was actually revealed. That's a significant amount of Bitcoin, and there is still a risk that the government can attack Bitcoin, whether it's through confiscating like large swaths of miners, or shutting off all the endpoints, or crashing the price, or trying to buy up Bitcoin and then crash it, or whatever. There is still a threat of a government attack on Bitcoin, not nearly as big as it was in 2011 or even 2013 when they did try to shut off Bitcoin and go after Bitcoin, but it's still there. Bitcoin is big enough now that the risk is getting smaller and smaller every day that there will be a government attack. But that does not mean that there is no threat. And the reason that most of these altcoin founders are able to be public is because of Bitcoin, because Bitcoin disrupted their control over money in a way that showed the world that they can't shut off Bitcoin. So they can't shut off Bitcoin, but they can go after the founder of Bitcoin. That's the biggest fundamental thing about this. And if they go after the founder of some altcoin crypto, like, it's not big enough to matter. So they don't need, like, Ethereum is not a threat to the US dollar. Ethereum is not, like, Ripple's not a threat to the hegemony of the US control over oil and all commerce and like the reserve currency of the world and stuff. Like, those cryptocurrencies are just like shitcoin, like, they're just like stocks, okay? To be nice, they're just like stocks. You can buy them and whatever. Uh-oh, I'm cutting in and out. That's no good. Well, I think I hopefully people got that. Basically, this guy's wrong. Okay, let's keep going.
150,000 followers on Twitter, and this person is a spokesman for a business. Do you want to know the real reason Satoshi hasn't revealed his identity? I'll let Adam tell you himself.
So first one, in your opinion, who is Satoshi Nakamoto? I really don't know. I would suspect it's one person, just because of consistency of code and difficulty of keeping privacy and secrets across a group. But other than that, I think nobody really knows.
If you get an opportunity to know, who is it?
Well, I think actually it's better that we don't know, because it helps for Bitcoin to be considered like a digital commodity, that there was somebody that discovered the commodity, but there's not somebody. People have a background in hierarchical thinking. So some people are wired a little bit different, and they don't like authority and they want to think for themselves. But many things about society are hierarchical. And so if you look at what the media tends to do, sort of mass market media, and the average person, they see something new and they want who's in charge of it? Who should I ask? Could we ask somebody to change something if it doesn't suit us? And so, if there was an identified founder, that thinking would lead lots of people to asking or demanding things. So the fact that that founder is kind of apocryphal, news, and presumably he's not coming back at this point, right? That takes away that opportunity, which...
I mean, heaven forbid.
I wish he was Satoshi, honestly. That was awesome. I mean, I couldn't have said it better. Obviously, Adam Back has got it right there. I agree with everything he said. and hopefully, you understand what he was saying there. Commenting on what I was just talking about, how there is still a threat of Satoshi being revealed, Austin said, "We lived through the harassment of Phil Zimmerman for PGP, arrest of Liberty Reserve in late 90s, and yeah, also like the Feds raiding eGold in the 2000s. So Ross Ulbricht getting arrested, and Charlie Shrem being arrested for BitInstant running the exchange. Like there's a lot of examples of how the government thought that this was a threat and didn't want to see it succeed. And it's, whether you have any moral issues or not with Silk Road, like he did a nonviolent crime. A lot of people were fooled into thinking that Ross Ulbricht hired hitmen and stuff, and that was thrown out. And the defense wasn't even allowed to argue that it was actually the FBI agents that were corrupt and faked that. So everybody thought Ross Ulbricht was some like murderous person trying to kill people, when it was actually the FBI agents that went to jail for stealing millions of dollars in Bitcoin and faking this hit. So he went to jail for life for just developing code and allowing like a free market to happen where people could have nonviolent interactions with each other for their drugs. And, I'm not here to say that the morals of being able to buy and sell drugs is right, but I don't think the punishment fit the crime. They were trying to make an example out of somebody who used code nonviolently to actually make it safer for people to have interactions with drugs that they're addicted to or recreationally or whatever. And they were railroaded. If you want to continue learning about that, go watch the Ross Ulbricht documentary series, Railroaded. It presents a good perspective of the other side of that story. But suffice it to say that the government was wanting to make examples, and they still will. There's been a long history. So we got MZ say Bitcoin works just fine without a founder, or even better that way. It's just like Adam said it perfectly. He said it perfectly. I totally agree with you. Cody Wilson has a Silk Road video that's pure cringe. Is that what you said? I don't understand that. Cody Wilson was the guy that was trying to create the 3D gun thing. He was a Bitcoiner, and then he sort of switched his focus to like making 3D guns. And then he either got set up or he was like arrested for like prostitution or something like that. Like, honestly, it could be the same situation. It could be that they set him up and that actually never happened, but that's all I recall of Cody Wilson in the end, was that he got caught trying to get like a prostitute or something like that. You're saying Barely Sociable has a Silk Road video that's pure cringe. Well, maybe he's read it from, like, I think there was a book released called like American Kingpin or something that just totally told a one-sided, biased, anti-Ross picture. But you're in his video. Okay, well, I'm gonna have to watch that. But honestly, I don't know if I can make it through another one of this guy's videos. I think they're really well done. Like, they're well researched. There's some interesting stuff. It's good. It's a good storytelling, but it's so biased. I wish he presented more of the other side of the story. I mean, this guy doesn't, you know what? I'm so glad that we only have to deal with this type of stuff now instead of the 2017 stuff, which was like total conspiracy theory nonsense from the big blockers. And I just wish this guy would do a video on the big blockers and be biased against them. I'd love to see that. I would love to see how he takes them down, because there's so much, but this Barely Sociable guy just doesn't seem to understand the value and importance of decentralization at his core. I don't think he understands how the activism that is behind Bitcoin. He doesn't understand the mission. He doesn't understand the threat that like fiat money is on the average person, how unfair the money system is, how it's a Ponzi for the 0.1%, and how Bitcoin is really the only other option you have. I don't think that he understands really much about Bitcoin and why it's valuable, although he did say on his Twitter that he likes Bitcoin. So I don't know, maybe he's just trying to get clicks and views. But this is pretty much over. I'm just going to quick put it back on 1.5 and let's finish it up.
Did people think for themselves? And that seems to be a common theme in the Bitcoin project. In 2015, the entire community was in favor of increasing the block size, but Blockstream and all the other developers forced that upon everyone else. Considering that Bitcoin is supposed to be this censorship-proof money, that's really, really ironic. And not to mention the blatant manipulation when Satoshi wrote that everyone has to agree.
Blockstream is not Bitcoin. We say it again. I've said it before. Blockstream could disappear and Bitcoin would still be successful. Blockstream is not Bitcoin. There was plenty of other people developing on Bitcoin. He's totally disregarding all the users. The users are what matters in Bitcoin. People that own and use and run nodes, they are what matters in Bitcoin. And the overwhelming majority of people were not in favor of a contentious fork. So he's just wrong.
Agree on a change. If you ever use r/Bitcoin in the present day, it's still heavily censored. You're not allowed
That's
to be critical of
true.
Bitcoin in any way. Forget that a lot of other projects have already fixed its problems.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, and you don't put your faith in it, then Satoshi Nakamoto can't deliver you from.
Well, other projects have fixed its problems. That's a common misconception amongst altcoiners because you think that there is a problem to fix. The only, this guy clearly didn't talk about Lightning Network or even see the value in having a side chain or really get to the point of Bitcoin as money and as a store of value. So if he's just focusing on the payments use case and the transactions per second at the base layer, then I guess he could think that's a problem and that other like Gen 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 blockchains fix the problem. But he doesn't understand that the way Bitcoiners are scaling Bitcoin is through innovations in cryptography and second layer solutions and treating the block space as a scarce resource to innovate through science rather than just to lazily change the numbers and say, oh, let's just go to a 32 megabyte block space. Block. So he's wrong again to say that the other projects have fixed it.
From the evil banks. Heaven forbid people in a community-driven project ask for something to be catered towards the community. The problem here is
it's not people that were asking for it. It was egotists, corporations, and mega miners. So the majority of people were against that. The majority of the users were against that. It was the mega mining pool owners, the creators of the mining hardware Bitmain and their friends, and the egotists that were like totally against being censored and having their ideas rejected. Those people who were like marketing people, entrepreneur type people that didn't want to support Bitcoin and wanted to make money and were like optimizing the search engines for the term the BTC or Bit by Bitcoin terms, like those people, like Coinbase founder and like the VCs and stuff like that. The corporate guys, the big miners, the big corps, like they were the people that wanted to change it. And the significant majority of developers and users and small miners were against it. And that's why this guy's wrong. Austin said many tech suggestions for BTC fungibility improvements are made pseudonymously, like Tom Elvis Judasaur. Yeah, there's definitely some things that would be better if Bitcoin had at the base layer, but that is still an ongoing debate, and we still have we have things coming down the road that will help us with fungibility. We've got CoinJoin and what the heck's that called? PayJoin and Taproot and Schnorr and all that stuff coming. So it's not finished. If you're watching this video and you made it all the way through the end and you don't already have Bitcoin, like you're early. We're still early. Like what's the rush? I mean, Adam said it best there, so I'm not going to try to say it again.
The conflict of interest. With hiding your identity, you have two sets of investors to please. Those who invest in Bitcoin, who want it to succeed in the long term, and investors of Blockstream who want to push transactions off the main network to make money.
He's focusing on Blockstream again. Blockstream is not Bitcoin.
And you know you've created a borderline cult when the same people that used to be obsessed with decentralization now actively support Blockstream's alternative centralized network.
This is total bullshit as well. There's been contentious debates about the Liquid network. A lot of Bitcoiners even like Willie or whatever, like one of the main guys is always correcting people on Twitter saying that like, you know, LBTC is not Bitcoin and things like that. Like the developers are not all like cheerleaders for Liquid and all that stuff. So like, oh, here we go. Look, Peter Todd hates Liquid. So it's not, and Blockstream is not Bitcoin. Yes, Blockstream is good for Bitcoin, but Blockstream, if it disappeared, would not really negatively affect Bitcoin. Bitcoin would continue. Bitcoin would still succeed. And this guy's just focusing too much on the Blockstream conspiracy and making shit up. Like, yeah, some people are going to be excited about Liquid. Some people are going to be cheerleading it, but it's not a cult. It's just like some people are for it, and a bunch of people always debate it. Go on Bitcoin Twitter, and you'll see like lots of people aren't like really that impressed by Liquid and don't really care that much about Liquid. Liquid is meant for certain use cases, and most average users are not even going to ever touch Liquid and need to know like use it. Liquid is more for like businesses and stuff and traders and stuff. You know, companies that want to launch tokens and stuff like that. It's not what this guy's making it out to sound like. So Austin said, if lots of people want to fly in a plane, we don't let Expedia design the new plane with more seats. Maybe it's too late. I don't get that one. If lots of people want to fly on a plane, we don't let Expedia, the website that books flights, design the new plane with more seats, right? So he's making the comparison that because Coinbase or one of these sites that like sells Bitcoin wants more to sell more Bitcoin, obviously it'd be better for them. Or even Roger Ver, like from Bitcoin.com, wants just to throw more passengers in the plane. Like, he's not an engineer, so he shouldn't really have a say. And when he does have a say, his ideas are rejected, and he cannot take the rejection because his ego is too big and he thinks he's so important that instead of getting into consensus, he takes a hissy fit and takes his basketball and goes on a different court and plays there. So that's really what happened there. Austin said, marketers who run businesses like exchanges, Bitcoin.com, etc., shouldn't have equal say in engineering trade-off. Yeah, they shouldn't. They don't. And now they have their own coin. And I mean, it's like the battleground of ideas is like Trace Mayer always says, like, feel free to fork off. It can happen. Like, this is like a free software, open source software. They did fork off. They took their ball to the other court and it's totally failed. So their ideas were rejected on Bitcoin, and then they took them and went, and they're pretty much getting rejected, amongst their own communities as well. Well, they are all in an echo chamber, so they all think the ideas are great. But if you look at the hash rate of the coins and the usage and the transactions and the price and every metric possible, Bitcoin is succeeding and the big blockers are failing. So Matt Corallo was another influential Bitcoin developer, advised on Twitter against using Liquid. So just more proof that this guy's just totally making this up. It's not a cult of like an echo chamber where we all think everything that Blockstream does is great. It's just not true. So Blockstream is good. I think Blockstream's great. Don't get me wrong. I think Blockstream is an asset to Bitcoin. But I also recognize that they're not Bitcoin, and if they disappeared tomorrow, it wouldn't really make a difference to Bitcoin.
This situation has been very disappointing to watch unfold. This is Barely Sociable. Have a good night.
Watch unfold. This guy just started his YouTube channel in like 6 months ago. He didn't watch any of this unfold. This guy's just started tweeting about Bitcoin in January of 2020. What did this guy watch unfold? This guy just got to Bitcoin, and he's already acting like he knows everything about Bitcoin. And he clearly shows from this video that he doesn't understand Bitcoin. Let's give him a couple more years, and hopefully he gets it. But anyways, listen, this has gone on for 3 hours. Hopefully you've enjoyed this take of a Bitcoiner reacting to the Bitcoin unmasking of Satoshi Nakamoto, which is complete bullshit. And I got to say, MZ, you were here the entire time, so thank you for making it through with me. I gotta love that. I had someone be here the entire time, and thanks to Austin for joining. Listen, we had a few people here for like over an hour, so that's impressive. Thanks a lot, guys, for supporting my ramblings. Oh, and Jesse's watching too. Great. So if you like this type of content, subscribe to my channel or follow me on Twitter or whatever, at Brad Mills Can on Twitter. And my podcast is Magic Internet Money. You can just search it on any podcasts platform and you'll get Magic Internet Money. It's my podcast. It's kind of content like this. And yeah, thanks for watching. See you later.